and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Helen, can I have apologies, please?
I have apologies from Councillor Chris Williams, who is replaced today by Councillor Wallace Redford.
Thank you, Wallace.
And I've also had apologies just now from Sean Taylor.
Okay.
And the two portfolio holders, which you know about as well.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, there is a cabinet meeting taking place. So both Colin Hayfield and Jeff Morgan are in that. We're hoping they'll join later on. So what I intend to do, if everyone's happy, is move a section of item 3, so the questions to the cabinet members, to the end of the meeting in the hope they come, but we'll still have updates from senior officers at item 3. Okay, members' disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest, please. Okay, so minutes of the previous meetings, we have the 14th of July. I shan't go page by page, so could members, or officers indeed, shout up if there are any errors, anything you wish to raise? This is for the 14th of July. No. 23rd of July? Okay. Helen will have to digitally sign and whatever is required. Item 3. So, as I said, cabinet members aren't with us. Updates from senior officers. Do we have any?
No updates from me, Chair.
No. Okay. Right then, on to item 4, which is the Children and Young People's Participation Update, and over to Shin and Dave Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that we've got some young people with us today. I'm not sure if they've all managed to access it, but I can certainly see that Elizabeth Nelson has joined us. I can see that Tawanda Atkinson has joined us, and Adam Ratcliffe. Morgan Stinchcombe, I believe, is also here. Harley Fry is, I know, that was not feeling particularly well yesterday, so I cannot see him as present currently. And Georgina Hopwood, can't see her name on there currently, but hopefully she'll be able to join us at some point. Moving on to the report. Just some context in respect to the update. We did have the Participation and Engagement Strategy come to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 15th of Jan. And there was an update of the report on the 12th of March, and it was agreed by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for updates to be brought annually. The report was due on the 28th of April, but this was delayed as a result of the public health crisis. So the report currently will take us over the period right through to September 2020. The focus of the report is over 2019 through to March 2020. The report focuses on the page 7 of the Participation in Engagement Strategy, which has got the priorities, young people's priorities listed on it, and that's page 7 of the Participation and Engagement Strategy. Much of the work that's been done within the Participation Engagement Strategy, some of it has been supported by targeted youth support, and Appendix 1 carries some examples of where young people have been engaged in working with the council. The participation team within children and families also has supported some of the work that features within the actual strategy, and Appendix 2 lists a range of diverse activities and projects that have involved both young people and staff working together. It's also worth noting at this point that the Children and Families Service has also undertaken a huge programme of restorative practice training. And this is quite important because this is encouraging quite a cultural shift within children and families in particular, moving from a position where we are, rather than doing to people, we are doing with, allowing people to become more independent in finding their own solutions. Moving on to the priorities themselves, there have been meetings that have been held. I think 3 in total we've held over last year, right through to March 2020, which was led by Councillor Colin Hayfield. And this was to try and give some momentum to the priorities that have been identified by young people. The priorities covered the areas keep healthy, be safe, have fun and do well, take part and think about your future. Under keep healthy, you'll see under Appendix 3, we have got an update. We have got an update from commissioning services, which provides the services that the County Council has commissioned on emotional well-being and mental health services for young people. It also has within that appendix the commissioning service business continuity plan, which illustrates the work that is being undertaken during the public health pandemic. And under the priority keep healthy, we've also got initiatives for young people. For example, within the care leaving offer, where we offer young people access to the gym, we also provide young people access to a mentor if they so choose to have one, and run staying healthy and wellbeing workshops. Moving on to Be Safe, we have a little table within the report which outlines an update from education, and the focus of the update from education is around an area that young people had identified, which is bullying and peer pressure. So education have outlined as part of their strategy how they're addressing these issues, working in partnership with schools. Moving on to C, have fun and do well, we have a further update from education in respect to the priorities around young people identifying more employment opportunities, better support for young people moving into further education, and also alternative routes into education. In respect to some vulnerable young people, within the care leavers offer, there are other opportunities available to young people. So, for example, within the offer, we have ring-fenced opportunities for apprenticeships. We offer driving lessons, which can be quite important for young people if they're going to access employment. Drop-ins to support them with seeking employment. Support for universal credit applications if that is required. Grants supporting education and learning via the Barradell and Tiffin Fund, additional tutoring for maths and English, and access to a careers advisor. Moving on to D, which is take part. Once again, education has provided an update about preparation for adulthood. There's been a particular focus for young people who would like certainly schools to do more in respect to preparing them for adulthood, within that, young people in care had mentioned that they also wanted much more support in building life skills and preparing for independence. Within the care leaving offer, there is again mentoring support for young people if they so choose it, as they're journeying into independence. We do offer council tax reimbursements, a home furnishing grant to the value of about £2,000. There is a shop that had been set up by young people. They had collected items through donations, which would allow young people to access other items if they so required, which is currently not running because we've had to clear it out over the months where people were not able to access it as a result of COVID. There's also been an increased focus on supporting foster carers to nurture young people towards independence. Shortly, Dave Jones will give an update on the Warwick Youth Council and what the local forums in Stratford, Rugby, Nuneaton, Bedworth, Warwick and North Warwickshire are currently doing. The report also looks at the fifth area, which is think about your future, which comes under item E, and these are priorities that did not really make much movement. One of them was young people saying that they had been campaigning to introduce the national living wage, and there's been very little progress on this area. Another area that young people had identified is that they were seeking cheaper, better, more accessible transport, and this has been an ongoing issue for a number of years, and we've not been able to find an agreeable way forward or a manageable way forward on how to support this issue. And young people had also identified an issue of voting at 16. And again, there's some limitations in terms of what Warwickshire County Council can do to make those changes happen. But certainly supporting those initiatives is something that we could continue doing. There are emerging priorities, moving on to 5.4, for young people. There was a survey carried out in January and February 2020, and we had a response of almost 1,400 young people. And priorities, not surprisingly, had arisen around the environment, reducing plastic waste pollution, and protecting endangered species. Another priority around safety, mental health surfaced again, tackling knife crime and anti-bullying. So bullying and mental health feature almost yearly when we do ask young people. And area C, again, services for young people, more careers advice, work experience, tackling youth homelessness, and a better curriculum for life, which we've already seen has appeared as a priority. Moving on to 5.5, clearly COVID-19 has had an impact on some of the direct work that we do with young people. Fortunately for us, Warwickshire had rolled out new technologies through Surface Pro and Microsoft Teams, which had allowed us to start to engage with young people. Clearly, we've had an initiative to try and support young people to also be able to access technologies, because it's not just about us having technologies. You'll see that under 5.5, there is listed a range of activities that we have undertaken from March through till September. Some examples: it's providing young parents with a newborn child gift boxes to the value of £50 to give them a good start. But also there were young people that were involved in creating video messages about keeping safe whilst the public health pandemic was at its peak. We continue to have young people involved in Warwickshire County Council interview panels where we could. We had continued to involve young people on online national and regional conferences. We continued the Warwick Youth Council meetings with young people and the Children in Care Council in Care Leaver Forum meetings, and they took place more frequently. We used to do face-to-face monthly, but we had moved them to fortnightly and 3 weekly. And there'd also been a peer-to-peer peer mentoring project which was being supported online. So there were areas of work that we were still able to progress. Engaging young people, some of the positives is that we were able to engage young people that were unable to access some of our face-to-face meetings previously. So we did find that young people in different parts of the county and also from outside of the county were able to access meetings that we were holding online. The downside is that we had some young people that didn't quite like the interaction online. They preferred face-to-face. So some young people have drifted off. We know that there are issues around isolation and loneliness for young people, and care experience for young people can be particularly vulnerable at this time. However, there is good potential in the future to operate a combination of both online and face-to-face working with young people. So we've actually learned a lot, as I'm sure you're aware, from this whole experience, albeit it's not been a great one for us all. So we're really asking the committee to consider giving some more traction to areas around voting for 16 to 17-year-olds, living wage and public transport, which are the areas that we've not really been able to progress. To also for the committee to acknowledge the emerging priorities that have been identified, and to support the work of the participation strategy, so that we can build it in as part of the recovery plan for Warwickshire. I just wanted to pass over to Dave Jones at this point to see if he wanted to make some further comments around Warwickshire Youth Council and the local forums. Dave.
Thank you, Shin. Good morning, everybody. Just a brief talk over what's already in there, and to go over some basic outlines of the Warwickshire Youth Council and the area youth forums. So the Warwickshire Youth Council is affiliated to the British Youth Council, and we're an active member of the Midland Region branch. Warwickshire young people's voices get heard through this council. The way that we do this is we have regular meetings with our young people. So every month at Shire Hall, the young people meet for the area council, and they feed back all of that information from their local areas. We have local councils, which we call area forums, that represent the 5 areas of Warwickshire and focus on more local issues affecting young people. This project's open to all young people who are interested in making a difference in their communities, and the aim is to ensure that all young people have a voice in what affects them in their communities in Warwickshire. They meet, so the local forums meet once a month. However, young people and staff meet more often when they're developing projects and delivering on those projects. Recently, the Stratford Youth Forum have launched a film project to encourage young people to share their views about where they live. The Rugby Youth Forum has lots of political focus on Brexit and the 2019 general elections. As a result, 3 young people have joined different political parties. I won't disclose who they are. The Nuneaton and Bedworth Youth Forum have carried out surveys ascertaining issues important to children and young people. The forum met with Marcus Jones MP to update him on their county campaigns. Members of the Youth Forum have started volunteering with voluntary youth agencies, using their skills and knowledge to make sure their voices are heard. The Warwick Youth Forum completed a public survey on attitudes towards knife crime. They held discussions about Brexit and completed surveys with Warwickshire University on the issue. The North Warwickshire Youth Forum held a successful question and answer session with their local MP, Craig Tracy. Mr. Tracy was quizzed on the issues such as the removal of politics from schools teaching, curriculums for life, racial abuse, Brexit and teenage pregnancy, also knife crime and male suicides. The forums continue to meet and will be meeting online for the near future. The initial COVID situation led to face-to-face meetings being abandoned. However, the online meetings have been very successful, and young people's participation within them has been increasing over the last few months. Thank you.
Chair, can I just now invite
Please.
people to be able to ask young people questions because they are here. So we have Tawanda here, Beth, Georgina, Morgan, and Adam.
My question was going to be, what would be the best way to get the young people? I do hate grouping them as young people. They're not an alien species, but to get people involved, would they like to say a few words now, perhaps jump in when questions are asked by councillors? Because as much as I and other members enjoy listening to officers at meetings, I'm sure we'd all much prefer to hear from the young people who are with us today. So what would be more preferable?
I think it would be helpful for some of the young people if some issues were identified against which they can make comments and contributions.
Okay. Can I just ask a quick question about the IT issue, Shin? You said that you thought that some young people had drifted away, disengaged because meetings were being held online. Did you not find that some people found it more comfortable to do things online? Or it was easier for them, perhaps less stuffy, less formal in certain settings?
Shall we ask the young people to be able to respond to that? So if can I just ask if any of the young people want to make a comment, it may be helpful if you put your hand up, and then when we see your hand up, we can then you can then speak. So I don't know if we want to start with someone like Beth. Beth, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah. From Warwickshire, when we meet face to face, it's not really much in a formal setting.
Okay.
So me personally, online suits my life better because I'm a young mum. But I do also like to meet face to face with the staff, my friends. It makes things easier in some aspects because I'm still getting that social life. COVID-19 has made a lot of young people feel really insecure, really isolated, and I can speak, I did feel really isolated during COVID, but now that things are starting to get back to normal, well, a little bit, it is making somewhat of a difference, but I'm still very much a person that likes to meet face to face with people. I like to have a proper conversation, which I can still do online, but I just prefer face to face. Because in Warwickshire, when we go to Portland House, because I'm based in Nuneaton, so we have like hot drinks with each other, we chat, we talk, and it's not always something like about like care, stuff like that. We can have like informal chats and like we're people to listen to, so we can listen to each other and we can help and balance each other. And the good thing is as well, before COVID started, me and Liz and a few other young mums, we were arranging to try and get like a baby session in, so we could encourage all young mums to bring their children so they could have their social time. But then us young mums can meet each other and make mum friends, as people call them. So we've got something in common, and I know that is something we are very eager to restart back up once COVID's over.
Yeah, understandable. Thank you. This is a hand up. I think it's Tawanda.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Going off what Elizabeth was saying, I do agree. I kind of do like both doing online and in person, but I felt personally online there's a lot of complications. There's been multiple times where I haven't received the link to the meeting, or there's been complications with the link, and it's kind of messed up there. But I felt that when I do online, I feel like it can be very formal and you don't really know what's happening. You're not very much told much, as to when we were doing the face-to-face meetings, it was more informal and people just chatting, and it was a more of a homey thing. You feel restricted in a way too. You have to conform and be more formal, if that makes sense. I felt more comfortable doing face to face because we could have a proper conversation and a genuine conversation. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Adam, hand up there.
I really have felt it difficult with these online sessions because I am a young carer, and because of the current climate and you just want to get away from things in life that we haven't been able to do because it's been online, same house, same thing, because my mum has been shielding, and it just really has been difficult just not getting away to go to the young carer sessions that I do online, but they're not as good as face to face because it's not as structured. Even though we meet as a county, it's just not the same to go and speak to your local worker to speak about the issues and how they can support you. So they do really need some sort of place on their own where they can go that can be socially distanced, places like parks, but then again it's not as private as like what you provide at the Ratcliffe Centre in Aviston, because in there you've got several different rooms where you can shut the door and speak to that worker. That would really help if that come back like that, because in parks people can hear you and make fun of you. That just isn't fair to all of us.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to bring Jonathan in, and perhaps he's got a different question, and then bring Georgina in, who can speak to Jonathan's question and the one I asked. So, Jonathan, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, it's great to see everyone here today. So I've got kind of two sets of things I want to ask about, so I'll just do the first one first, and then you can... the first set is about kind of that leaving care transition that Shin talks about in the report, and the feedback for a lot of years that we've got is it's felt a bit like falling off a cliff sometimes when you leave care, and it does really sound like there's some positive things there to try and address that, to think about apprenticeships and kind of thinking about support all the way through to 25. But I'd be really interested to hear if any of you have kind of been through that transition, sort of that what that's been like in practice, what it's felt like, and whether you think things are improving.
I think that Elizabeth has got a hand up, and Elizabeth, having been through it, it may be good to hear from Elizabeth. And there's Tuanda's just got her hand up, and I know that Tuanda's now approaching that transition. So it may be good to hear from young people about what they're feeling.
Okay. I think Beth had her hand up first. Should we go to Beth?
Wow, I have been through it, and me personally, it was not a good experience. I, like every young person, went into foster care. I had not really any sort of idea what I was going to be facing. And as soon as I hit 18, that was it. I was in supported accommodation. I was like on my own. I had not learned how to budget money. You know, I only got 60 quid a week, so that covered, you know, my bit in rent, my food and my travel, and you know, to get to college. And I just didn't have any of that preparation, and I really struggled. I thought it was really unfair just to throw me in the deep end like that. And I know there is a lot of young people that are facing that, and I think there needs to be some sort of more support and more awareness. Like in the transition of you being 17 to 18, that needs to be the time then that you learn more of your cooking skills. You learn to clean, you know, your property, you know, fully, stuff like that. You have your budgeting things done. You know, you learn how, well, some young people can't even travel on their own. So is that very fair at 18 to be asking them, you know, to travel on their own? I don't particularly think that is. You know, making sure they're comfortable with the idea of living on their own, because not most 18-year-olds are capable of living on their own, and there's not really that support there. Because although some young people don't want to be in foster care and foster placement, the automatic answer is, okay, you live on your own, you're in supported accommodation. But what if that young person isn't ready, it doesn't feel like they can live on their own? You guys are kind of forcing them, well, social services are forcing them to be put into that situation, which makes us more vulnerable. are more easy to get hurt and stuff, because we haven't had that knowledge, we've not had that basic awareness that needs to be put in when we hit 17. We need to know what we're going to be facing in the next year when we turn 18. And unfortunately, I didn't quite make that year where all these changes can be put into place. But I'd like to see the next generations, the next younger ones, actually feel more comfortable with it and actually know what they're going to be facing rather than having to learn in the deep end. Because I literally lived off like 20 quid a week for food. That was after me paying my my rent and my bus fare travel. I literally had to afford 20 quid for food, and that isn't enough to live on.
So the key time that you would have wanted that extra support was kind of in that 16 to 17, that preparation year.
Yeah. Because I think at that point, that's when 16, 17 is when we're deciding, okay, where do we want to go from here? What do we want to do? That is the time, especially like when you're 16, you're doing your GCSEs. They ask you, what college are you going to? What are you going to be studying? You know, things like that. So that would be a good time to get the independency skills being put into place.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Okay. Tyler, do you want to come in?
Hi. I was going to say, I do agree that with Elizabeth that we should start our transition earlier. But I'm 16 right now. I'm currently in college. I feel like if I was told all this information before, I was being prepared for this beforehand, like at the age of 15, I feel like I might have been able to have a better plan in head, because I have a decent plan in head. But because I'm 16 now, I'm in college, I'm doing GCSEs, at 15-year-old, you're just starting, like, going into year 10, you're just going to do your GCSEs, you're planning to do your GCSEs, and now from the age of 16 to 17, you are doing GCSEs. Now on top of that, you got to think about where you want to go, what job you want to get, and now you've also got to think about all these other things, like planning how to cook, how to clean for yourself, where you want to live. I think that's a lot to take in from a 16 to 18-year-old. That is a lot to deal with. And the fact that it can play on someone's mental a lot. And at my age, I want to be able to, I'm in college, so I want to be able to get my plan in head. I feel like if I was told this before, I feel like I wouldn't be so overwhelmed, because I'm really, really scared, because I've heard so many young people think now that they get money from the furniture they get for their new apartment, they get money from this, money from that, they just take all that money and run along with it. Now they spent all that money, they've done whatever they've done with it, and now they're homeless. And because they're homeless, there's no one out there that can help them. They have no family, they have no friends, they have no house, they are homeless, they have nothing to support them, because they never were given help. They were just given all this, and now they have no idea what to do with it. They weren't told anything to do with it. And I don't want to end up that way, because I started the process late, if that makes sense. And it scares me, because I can end up that way just by making a wrong move. And I'm currently meant to be doing my pathway plan, and it's been backed up for so many months. And I'm in college as well. It's a repeated process. It's not only happening to me, but I guarantee you, if you were to ask someone else or another young child, it's probably happening to them as well. And I may end up in a good place where I actually do get a nice apartment, and I get a job, and I get an apprenticeship. But there's going to be another child, another young child out there that's going to maybe have the apartment, but not have the money for it, not have the support for it, may not even want to live on their own because they're so scared. There's not enough support out there, and I'm only being told this now. I wasn't told this years ago when I wanted to try and plan this out. It's kind of being pushed out there and being given, you know what, you can do this on your own, and we can't. We are young children, we are 16 years old and younger, and you're giving this to us right now. and we got all this coming to us, and not to only blame. This is going to weigh on someone's mental. It can cause anxiety, it can cause depression, and they have no one else they can talk to about it because they feel that no one else is going to do it. If that makes sense. I know I'm rambling, but it's hard.
So you'd prefer to like start that preparation earlier and then continue, but also your concern at the moment is obviously everything's been delayed with COVID, and therefore the risk is that transition is going to happen whether or not you have that preparation. Yeah.
And although 15 is a little young, it's just starting at baby steps. Like when I was in school, I was in a predominantly boys' school, so there's more boys than girls, and we were doing food classes, for example. Most of them didn't even know how to make an egg sandwich. As plain as that, they didn't even know how to cook for themselves. So now, they may not be in care, but now that they're 16, 17 now, transitioning, they don't even know how to cook for themselves, clean for themselves, they don't know how to use their money properly, and like, not to mention just to travel. They're 16, 17 now, they're probably maybe in college. Travel alone, for me, I spent about £35 this month on travel for about 15 days worth of travel. And that £35 could have been spent on clothes, could have been spent on food, could have been spent on like genuine things I need. But I spent that on travel. That is a lot of money. And on top of that, I've got to deal with other things. So it's a build-up of different things, and I don't think it is fair because we just handed it and meant to know what to do with it. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. If there are any officers who want to jump in after points are raised, then please do. Just come on the screen. Otherwise, Beth, do you want to come back on some of the things that Tawanda was saying? Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think what it is from the young people's point of view is that when you're in foster care, like, you're sugar-coated, well taken care of. You know, you haven't, like, when I was in foster care, all the way till I was the age of 15, I was never allowed near the cooker. You know, I had £500 shopping limit, you know, things like that. And then all of a sudden, as soon as, you hit 18, I'm sorry now, you're on your own. Like, you don't have any of that. And, and we sit and we think, well, we can't speak to nobody about it. You know, our friends ain't in foster care. Our friends haven't gone through this. So there's no one to relate. Who can I speak to? Well, actually, I'm not ready. So like Tawanda was saying, it leads to depression. It leads to us then going, well, I have to look after myself, but how? You know, it gives that insecurity, it makes us feel vulnerable. And when us young people feel vulnerable, we're more likely to do irrational things, like reaching out to the wrong people that say they've got our best interests at heart, but really don't. Getting involved in drugs, for example, to try and stop us eating as much, to try and save that money, but really we're not, because that awareness isn't there. And I really think if we're going to keep sugarcoating the people in foster care and really making them feel like life is all great, it's like a perfect life, but then all of a sudden you're not actually getting that reality. When you find out that actually you're not actually able to stay in foster care and you're not going to get your shopping limits and you're not going to have as much support, that hits you, and that hits you big time. That really, like, for me, I was already diagnosed with depression and PTSD because of my childhood past. But when I got told that was it. I was straight back on my meds. I was straight back being depressed again. So I thought I couldn't handle it. Well, I'm actually quite lucky because I went through supported accommodation and now I've got my own house. I've got a 2-bedroom house. I've got a daughter that I can now take care of. But I didn't have the support. I sat and I spent my hours investing in YouTube, watching, well, how do I cook? How do I actually clean my property? It sounds stupid, but, like, for example, a cooker. I had no idea how to clean a cooker. I had no idea how to clean a bathroom. Now, it's a good job we have got technology because I was just able to put all that into YouTube, and I was able to learn it, and I was able to watch it. But now, for example, when it comes to us, for example, buying ourselves clothes, well, when we're on benefits and stuff like that, and we can't really go to work, we struggle. We struggle to be able to provide ourselves with clothes. You know, sometimes we even struggle to provide ourselves with more food. Sometimes we live on such a cheap budget that sometimes people go, you know, well, that's really cheap. You're not actually feeding yourself properly. But there's not actually been any of that general care that you get when you're 18, that you would have got when you were in foster care. And I really think, would you put your kids, if you've got kids in that situation, all of a sudden, you're loving them, you're caring them, and then, well, you're 18 now, you've got to do it on your own. I'll be there somewhat to support you, but, you're not going to get too much support from me. Would you really consider putting your kids through that? If the answer's no, and I know most of you will say no, why would you put young people through it? That's my view on it.
Okay. Sharon, did you want to come in?
I did, thank you. So can I just introduce myself? I'm Sharon Shaw and I'm the service manager for corporate parenting in Warwickshire. There's several things really that obviously we do meet with people like Beth and Tawanda on a regular basis through Children in Care Council and Care Leaders Forum, and a lot of the work that we are doing at the moment is really based on the views that we've received from young people such as Beth and Tawanda, and we really have listened to what they said. I just want to say that I actually find it really heartwarming, Beth, that you actually describe feeling loved and cared for in foster care. And I think that's a brilliant starting point, actually. So although your experience after leaving foster care might not have been so good, I'm just really pleased to hear that you did feel loved and cared for in foster care. I agree with both what Beth and Tawanda say about being prepared. And there is a fine balance about trying to almost give young people that message, like, as soon as you're 18, you're out of here, to actually there are other options for you and you don't have to leave at 18. We really have seen a significant increase in a number of young people who are staying put beyond 18. So they remain with their foster carers beyond the age of 18 as a staying put arrangement. We've also just recruited a worker whose sole role really will be to oversee staying put arrangements and supported lodgings for our young people. So again, young people can be in at 18, move into a lodgings basis where they continue to receive ongoing support rather than having to move straight into supported accommodation or accommodation of their own with their own tenancy. I think Overview and Scrutiny will be aware of the House Project as well, which again provides additional support. And one of the key things that Tawanda was just talking about was preparing our young people at an earlier age. We're just about to take a paper to SLT, which is an accredited independence training package, which will be facilitated and supported through the House Project, that will start with our young people at 14 years of age. And the young people can do as much of this as they want or don't want, really. It will be there on offer. And it's an online program. Their social workers, PAs, foster carers can support them with this. It doesn't need to be a specific worker. So, for example, if your foster carer is helping you to maybe learn, we'll use Tawanda's example, how to make an egg sandwich. That can be photographed, uploaded, and that's your evidence. So that's going to SLT. The drop-ins, as Beth talked about, have been, I think, a real lifeline for our young people. And both the drop-ins, particularly the one at Mighton, I would say, is equipped with an oven, a washing machine, etc. So we can actually be doing that sort of training with our young people. It has been difficult through COVID, but I know that Charity, who's one of our apprentices who works in the House Project, and Verity, who was our housing officer, was doing some YouTube videos of simple meals to learn how to cook, etc. So we really are taking on young people's views and trying to make our programme as broad as we possibly can. One of the key things as well, because I oversee fostering, is really working with our foster carers to support them, to support young people to become more independent. It is, we all know, when we talk about restorative practice, we talk about doing 4. I know as a parent myself, it was always so much easier for me to do for my child. It was easier for me to go in and tidy her bedroom because I'd have to nag her forever to get it tidy. And when she did tidy, it was never to the standard I thought was good enough. But we really want to encourage our foster carers to allow young people to be more independent within the foster placement, allow them to develop those skills. And I think we're working towards it. I think we've come a long way in the last year, 2 years, but we do recognise there's more work to be completed.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring in Corinne and then we'll go straight back to Tawanda afterwards, and that's okay with you? So, Corinne.
Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. That was really reassuring, Sharon, because after listening to Elizabeth and Tawanda, I was thinking this is just terrible. And you're right, Elizabeth, you know, I've got a daughter that's 20 who's going to university tomorrow, and I'm worried about that. And she's going to be in somewhere that, you know, is very cushioned, I guess, in that, you know, there will be halls of residence. So I wouldn't like to think that at 18 my children were suddenly out there in the big wide world without all those skills. But just a couple of things that sprung to mind, and as I say, listening to Sharon speak, it is reassuring to think that young people can stay with foster carers for longer or be with much more supported lodging. When you talk about the practicalities and the support that you feel you need earlier on, would that be with your foster carer, or would that be something you think should happen elsewhere? You know, who would you like to see give you that ongoing support? And the other bit you mentioned about depression and things, and you know, do you feel that the support is there through different channels with that? Where do you get your mental health support then? How does that go? And obviously looking back at the purpose for discussing it with regards to the cross-party committee, I think that would be a good thing for us to adopt, where we can actually, you know, councillors can then liaise with officers a bit more, and maybe we can be that sort of intermediary. So I'm quite, you know, really happy to support that, but it will be interesting to know who you feel should give you the practical skills, and are you getting the mental health support that you feel you need, or other young people need.
Beth, did you want to come in your hands up?
Well, the mental health service is somewhat good, but I feel like the waiting list is it's horrendous. Like, coming from somebody who's done years and years of psychiatric, you know, it took an awful long time for me to actually get the help I need. And in that time, I went from bad to much, much worse, you know, and I didn't have that any middle ground that I needed. So I think when we get the mental health support, it's good, but I also feel like it's long. You know, it's not sometimes seen as an urgent, like it's like an urgent thing, when really, you know, it should be taken into people's pasts. You know, it should be quite well, you know, quite an important thing. Regarding what you were saying regarding the you know, doing the practical work, I would really like to see the carers as well as maybe another service, you know, another service coming in at wherever's convenient, like Portland House or Moyton Park or wherever, you know, to actually do group sessions. So everyone's actually getting involved. It's not just an one-to-one basis, you know. You can actually share, you can learn your experiences, things like that. You can actually show off, you know, the cooking. Like, maybe we could set up some sort of work, or like a group, and we can like take pictures of the foods we've cooked, and like we can link down the recipes and stuff we've used, and maybe make a website or something to make sure it's easy access for all young people to use, no matter where we are. But maybe it's more the ones that us young people are more involved in, and maybe we can have be more involved in that, so we can say like what sort of foods we want to learn to cook, or what sort of stuff we want doing, you know,
That sounds excellent idea, Beth.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be having a conversation with you about you leading on that. If
Oh,
you're
definitely.
interested.
Like a skill sharing thing, really.
Yeah, and let us, because we have got quite a lot of older ones that have had to learn on our own. So why don't we let us teach some people that don't know how to do it? For example, it could be the basics. Could be, for example, washing your clothes and then get like the extra support in if that's needed. Or we could turn to for example Shane from Warwickshire or whoever it is from Myton Park, to really step in as well and be involved. So it's not just for young people, it's everybody, and it's like community work. I think that would be really beneficial, really helpful, and make sure that it's always available in some form or of another.
Great. Thank you. That sounds like a great idea.
Thank you. I think I'm having a bit of a problem with the technology. So I think Pam did have a hand up, but it went down. So I'll go to Pam, and then Shin, I'll bring you in after that.
Hi everybody, I'm Pam Williams. Really interesting conversation, and it's interesting to hear your feelings and what's happening to you, but reassuring to hear from Sharon as well. Just from my own experience, when I was young, my mother would not let me in the kitchen at all, and she wouldn't let me near an iron or let me do anything because she thought that I'd either burn myself or set the house on fire or cause some sort of disaster. But we were lucky enough to have domestic science at school. Now, I don't know whether you know what domestic science is, but we were taught how to cook, how to clean, how to sew. In fact, I've still got the apron that I made when I was about 11, when I was first in the domestic science class. And I think maybe this is something that we ought to be doing at school as well, not just, in the foster parents. But I can understand how the foster parents feel about actually, allowing people to do things in the home. Although I know some foster parents are very encouraging and get young people involved in all sorts of things. But yes, I think the schools have a part to play as well, but maybe we can think of doing things in the children's centres because we have got lots of facilities across the county where we can do things. And I know at Myton that is a fantastic facility down there, Sharon, and I've been there and seen what we've got available there. So perhaps we need to think a bit more carefully about how we encourage foster carers to be involved in all of these things. And I think your points are very valid, but I can remember very clearly being told, don't go near that iron, you'll set the place on fire, so these are tricky things and it's difficult. Everybody's different and everybody wants to do things at different ages. So for some people 11 is young, is the right age, but other people wouldn't be able to manage these things till later on. But I really want to pick up on, Adam, your issues about young carers. Because I think it is very difficult because you work very hard and your input is so important. And I think the points that you raised about not being able to get face to face with other people is really important. And I just wonder what the officers can offer or what we can offer. I mean, what is it that you feel you would really like to have put in place to help you at the moment? What do you think? Because there are a lot of young carers who are doing a lot of work. I mean, I care for my 96-year-old mother, but I'm definitely not a young carer, so I don't fit into that category. But I am doing an awful lot in terms of looking after her, and really it's very difficult to have the time to talk to other people about their experiences. So what is it that you would like, Adam?
I'd like to see some groups set up in Ratcliffe because that's nice, and it also then refers to life skills as well because it has a massive kitchen about the size of room that I'm in. That is great because you can easily social distance. It's got 2 ovens, it's got washing machine, it's got tumble dryer. Because I'm doing so much stuff at home and my education on top of that, and I'm doing food as well, but I just need to learn how to do more stuff, like doing the ironing board, putting holes in the clothes that I'm not doing yet, but yeah. Washing machine, because I don't know how to work that at all, because that is one of the hardest, because it has about 20 different settings, and it just really would help just getting away learning what normal people do on a day-to-day basis. That would really help. Small groups every week would just really help, bringing away from all society to the house for an hour or two.
Yeah, no, that is so important. I mean, my grandmother, they had a routine in those days. So they used to wash on a Monday, and on a Monday you'd have the leftovers from Sunday lunch. So you'd have whatever you had on Sunday, you'd have left over on a Monday. And they used to have these sort of routines, and everybody in the whole street did the same thing at the same time. So, but I do think I've got a bit of that from my grandmother. Routine is really important, and I think some of these things, it's, you know, we can learn from how people did things in the past, because it does make life easier if you have a routine. But I think getting together with other people to learn how they do things and have that sort of community feel is really important. And I know that they do that with the housing project, don't they? Are you involved in the housing project, Elizabeth, in any way?
I'm not, but my friends are, so I always hear about it, and I hear about the good opportunities it brings. I just missed the opportunity for it, which I'm quite disappointed of. But Sin gets me involved with so much, so I feel like I'm still somewhat involved, even if I'm not actually doing it myself.
Because that's been amazing. I mean, they even do things like decorating and going and choosing wallpaper and you know, making sure that the house is set up properly. But yeah, maybe we can think of something, Adam, to help with that. I think that would be really important to do that for young carers. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks. And thank you all for joining us today. It's been fascinating having you here with us. Thank you.
Shin, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of highlight. I think that Beth and Twanda and Adam and I'm sure Georgina Morgan have some good ideas. I know they have. They've shared them previously. I agree with a lot of what they say. A year and a half ago from now, we were in a very different place. I just wanted to sort of illustrate how some of the changes we've introduced begin to filter through, and how it takes time. So with the apprenticeships, and certainly last year we've had 3 care experienced young people go into full-time roles within Warwickshire County Council. We're certainly looking at advertising more apprenticeship opportunities. We're looking at about 5 or 6 vacancies that we want to fill with care experienced young people. Now, what we've had is an increase in interest. So we've had about 20 young people, 21 care experienced young people inquire about that, which was previously it was unheard of. We actually had to really get out there and try and recruit young people into these programs. Driving lessons, we've seen an increase in the number of young people that are accessing driving lessons. It was an opportunity that wasn't there before, but 10 free driving lessons that young people are getting. But we've also realised that in partnership with the Rees Foundation, young people can access additional driving lessons provided they've completed their theory test to the value of £700. We know that young people do take advantage of accessing the gym, which is quite good, because we know that keeping healthy also enables a healthy mind. Listening to young parents and recognising that there's initially difficulties in terms of buying things, so having a flat rate of £200 available to them so they can buy big items like cots and buggies, but also having a gift box to the value of £2 with nappies and other items for a small baby, so they don't have to sort of panic immediately if there's something missing. Young people engaged in the house project and moving on to phase 2. So we've seen an increase in interest by young people, but that's also led now to us looking at running an accredited program, which Sharon mentioned before, to help young people have a more practical way of developing independent living skills. So these changes are happening. Unfortunately, the likes of Beth had missed out on those because she's a bit older. but learning from Beth and learning from Tawanda, introducing these ideas, they're just beginning to filter through. And one key thing that we've got to get better at as a service is making sure that these opportunities are relayed to young people and communicated to young people much earlier, as Tawanda had said. So I just wanted to flag that up, and that we're beginning to see some positive changes beginning to come through, but there's always more that we can do.
Okay, thank you. Over to you then, Tawanda.
As I say, starting off with the drop-ins, about how they provide services to help young children with going into transitioning into leaving care and actually leaving care. I feel that I've heard a lot of like mixed things and good things about the drop-ins, and I've heard that they have helped a couple of people in care to transition and learn different things, and also like get certain items. Older people in care to get items like kettles and nappies for their children or young children. But I found that drop-ins are only in like Nuneaton and in Bedworth and in Coventry, and I live in Birmingham, and so the people that I know live like in Tamworth and stuff. There's no drop-ins over there. All meetings I've been to with like the Warwickshire County Council have been in like Warwick and Nuneaton and Coventry, and there's no type of services or support in Birmingham. There's no housing project, there's no apartments for young children, there's no kind of accommodation for young children, which I found is really hard because I'm transitioning into that. And because my college is in Birmingham, I can't stay in complexes all the way in Coventry. There's not enough, I feel there's not enough services over here for young children, and it's kind of, I think they needed to expand a lot more because there's children all over Warwickshire. That includes Birmingham, that includes other places as well, and there's not enough services to help out. So that's one thing about the drop-ins and accommodation. I was going to say about the what's this name? She said it was practical science? No, domestic science. I feel that is a really good idea to bring into the curriculum. There's been a lot of people I've been talking to, young people, even my siblings, they think in our curriculum that there's no kind of being taught how to make food, being taught how to use a washing machine, being taught how to just use a normal house phone, how to wash clothes, wash dishes, clean a house. There's none of that at all in the school curriculum. And the fact that they expect people to know that just because they live with somebody who cares for them, they're not going to learn and know that. They need to be taught that, and there's not enough of that. And I feel, even though it should be taught in the home, and many people are not taught in the home, I feel many people learn better in a different environment, which is for that environment. For example, I find it hard to do my school studies at home because when I'm at school, I know I'm to be in the school zone, I'm to do this school, I'm doing school work. But when I'm at home now, and I'm doing school work, I feel I can't concentrate. So I feel like if they were to make a program that was separate, it's not at home, but they would be able to go to it, or it's online, and they can do it somewhere in person with other people. I feel that they'd learn better, take in the knowledge, take in what they need to learn for the future. I feel like that would benefit a lot of institutions, not only in care but out of care. Other thing was mental health. I feel that is a massive issue. There's so many things in the system, like just transitioning into moving care, just being in care can cause so many mental problems. I know myself, this is personal. I feel I have anxiety and I've been in and out of depression for so many years. I've had no type of support. I've had no services handed to me. No one ever taken the time to talk to me, and it's just right there in front of your face. It's horrible, the fact that I feel like I can't talk to anybody. There's been no services. I haven't been told about anything. I've just heard now that there's services, mental health services, to help with like stuff like depression and anxiety. My siblings and some of my friends in care, they have felt so alone because they feel like they can't relate to anybody. And I have been to like this place called CAMS. It was terrible. I hated it. It felt horrible. I had to go there every week or so, once every week. I was in a room. It was so small and tiny. There was stuff everywhere. There was a chair here, a chair there. There's one person with a board, ticking off things, asking me questions, personal questions. He didn't even take the time to introduce himself. And this was the same thing for a month, and I said I couldn't do it anymore. I sat in that room answering personal questions, not even knowing who the guy was. And that was meant for my mental health. That was meant to help me. I felt horrible. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I stopped going to that. I just kept to myself. Everything that I felt I was going through care, through school, with bullying, with anxiety, it just keeps on bottling up, and there's no way that I can talk to anybody because I feel like I have no one to relate to. There's no type of services. There's nothing in hand. And mental health is a big thing, especially with my age group. There's so many kids that I know have not thought about suicide. There's so many children that I know that have just wanted to make it all go away because they have no one to talk to. They have no idea how it feels. They feel like you can't talk to anybody. And even just being in care, there's so many places I've been to. I've been from care home to care home to care home. Different people there, different foster carers, different rules, different regulations, and it's hard to be able to move from place to place. I'm 16 now. Imagine how old a child of 8 years old is going to feel from moving to place, have no one to talk to, switching social workers every few minutes, and they're all alone because they have no one to talk to. There's no help out there. There's no leaflets, there's no calls, there's no lines, there's nothing. It is horrible. And I feel it's not only just children in care and the fact that they have to deal with so many things as well. There's people out of care that have there's mental health. I know a lot of people that's a thought about just ending it all and generally just saying it out loud like it's nothing because it feels like it's nothing. There's no life, nothing. And I know this is really dark, but I have felt that pain. I still feel that pain right now. It's horrible the fact I feel like I can't talk to anybody because there's no one I can talk to. There's no services, there's no nothing. And there's other things that I'll relay on it. The social workers being changed every 5 minutes. It's horrible. There's nothing to support and help young children to kind of feel better about themselves. And I feel like that's why a lot of young children go to drugs because it numbs their pain, not only physically but mentally. I feel like people turn to the wrong people because they want to feel that kind of love, they want to feel that kind of support from a person that's not good enough. I feel like that's why a lot of people, especially young girls and young boys as well, not only like feel closed off about going into relationships and getting into abusive relationships because they have no one to talk to. Many of these situations happen because there's no support there, because they have no one to turn to. Many people are there left for dead because of these things. They have no one to talk to. There's nothing there. There's no stable. There's no net. You're basically told to jump down this hole. There's nothing to help you. There's nothing to support you. There's nothing to hold you from that fall. You're pushed over the edge. And that's why I feel many people don't There's nothing out there.
I think everyone will be pretty concerned about the lack of support.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't know, Taiwan. I don't know if it's your.
So I just said that I'm sure that everyone listening will be concerned. Was my okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Could I make a comment?
Sure. Bring in Elizabeth first, though, because I think it's probably going to follow from the points that Tanya made, and then Sharon, please do come in, and then I'll go to Dan. There's a few hands up. Thanks, Sharon. So Elizabeth, to you first, please.
I really think like there needs to be a lot more things accessible. I think like maybe doing like because in Nuneaton like we've got Portland House and I know a few other places have been mentioned. But what about doing something like that, like in the areas that don't have a support like building, for example, like Birmingham? Because I know in Portland House we do quite a lot of different things, and I was thinking, about making the house project more accessible, like more of a regional thing. So it's not just like Warwickshire doing it, like it's Birmingham, it's Coventry, it's wherever else. Do you know what I mean? Like we're all singing from like the same curriculum, and I do think like there is. I completely agree with Tawanda. There just needs to be some more support about mental health. I think what it is it needs to be known, like because coming from young people, when we feel like we have to report what we want to report something from social services, well, one, we feel like we can't. We feel like we haven't got the power. Like we're not going to be listened to. We don't know who to turn to. And then we've got things from our past that we want to talk about. I think it needs to be made clear that actually these services are available. Maybe given like a booklet or a leaflet, or making it clear that that are services you can go to, and that you are going to be listened to and taken seriously. And like you say, like we're all concerned about mental health, but it is a massive thing that is uprising with young people. Same with knife crime, same with drugs, same with bullying. These are points that yes are being worked on, but needs to be worked on faster in these areas. Because young people, when we're vulnerable, when we've got a vulnerable past, in some aspects we are blind. We are blind to see some dangers. We are, we think, we're on our own, so we put a wall up, so that stops everybody. So we're stopping everybody from helping us. Stuff like that. I think it needs to be made clear, even if like it's just young people, for example, just knowing that they've got 3 numbers to call off childline, and having that number. So if we feel like we can't deal with anything, there is somebody there that will listen, that we can talk to. Going one step further, do you know what I mean? And us feeling that we can say stuff. If things aren't right in foster placements, that we do have the right to say something to our social workers. If they don't listen, then we can take that further. We can take that higher. And who to? Like who can you go to higher than your social worker? If your social worker's not doing something right, like as young people, we don't know in what orders it follows. So it goes from like young people, foster carers, social worker. What? Who next? Your IRO. Who's after your RIO? Who can you go one step further if things aren't being dealt with correctly? And these are all part of reasons that affect our mental health as young people, because we feel like we're not being listened to. We feel like we've got to, in some aspect, do some sort of violence to ourselves to make them actually realise we're serious. In some aspects, like, and I can speak this from going down the mental health route. When saying like, I want to hurt myself to my foster carers, for example, they used to be like, oh no, you're fine. Do you know what I mean? They never actually took that seriously. They didn't sit down and go, well, talk to me. Why did you feel like that? What can I do to support you? And I feel like Shinna said, I'm one of the older ones who has had to learn more on their own, and now we've seen all the good things that are coming into place. But I think like it needs to be made clear, right from the people that are coming into foster care, right from the people that are care leavers or in the adult world, or even people that aren't in foster care, that there are support out there, and that there are people that will take it seriously. Because in young people, we just feel like we're on our own and we've got to fight against the whole world. And I know, like, in a lot of teens, like, I've now been able to see that actually they were trying to support me, but because of my own insecurities, my own mental health that I was going through at the time, I'm stable now. You know what I mean? I can have these conversations and not having it affect me. But you might have another young person that, hear bullying or hear drugs, and it's bringing things from their past back up, and they're not able to have that conversation and not have it affect them anymore. So definitely mental health needs to be known. It needs to be known a lot more, and we need to know what support's out there, what teams are out there, numbers, or even if it's just like an email that we can have access to or something. So like, or write things down on paper. But if we write things down on paper and we've got that feel like our foster care is going to find it, what's going to be taken seriously, or what's going to happen if they see this, we as young people, we have a lot of feelings, a lot of thoughts that needs to come out. But in what controlled way can we do that? Because in a lot of people, they take it out on their foster carers in a lot of aspects, and it's not right and things like that. But it is something that's done. So what can we put into place? And this would be my question, to make young people feel more secure, and how can we go about making it known to young people that there is support out there in whatever form that can be? Because I feel like, because I'm one of the older ones, I feel like I kind of have a duty as well, like to make like the young people know that they're not alone, and like I've gone through it as well, so I can relate and things like that. And this is why I'm so eager to be involved in everything, because I want people to know they're not alone. Because when we go through this is what goes in our minds: we're alone. Nobody else understands. And I think it'll be so beneficial if you do have care leavers or older ones that have been there and done that, and can talk to them, things like that, and to support them so they actually realise and go, well, actually, I'm not alone, but I can deal with it and I can make my life better. And I just think everything just needs to be known when it comes around mental health, and foster carers need more training in it, because they go oblivious. Do you know what I mean? They don't know how to support, they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. Sometimes they feel like, you're a danger and things like that, and then they get scared of you. But really, for that young person, they're crying out for help. Do you know what I mean? They're crying for a hug. They're crying for that, that comfort and things. So I think there needs to be more training, and I think us young people need to know on what support's out there and who we can go to talk to and things, and who we can actually go to if there's a problem, like with a social worker or an IRO, to make sure our voices are heard. And I'd always come back to that, because I feel like when I was going in care, my voice wasn't heard. All of a sudden, like, until me being a care leaver. So for me being 18, my voice now is finally heard. And now I can stand up and I can make a difference. And I want to make a difference. And I want to make the next generation even better for the next people that are in foster care, and to improve it. So we actually get one solid, one decent thing that actually us young people aren't afraid to be a part of, and ain't actually afraid to say, well, actually, yeah, I am a care leaver. Because back in my time, if we go, oh, you're a care leaver, you get picked on, you get your head kicked in, you get battered, you get stabbed, whatever. Do you know what I mean? But actually to be a part and go, well, actually, no, I am a care leaver, and I've learned. Do you know what I mean? And I'm no different. I'm no different to anyone else. And I have learned, and I can live on my own. And this is the achievement we need to get to. But for the first few steps is us young people and people in care need to know what teams are out there, what support's out there, like their numbers and things like that. Not for their foster carers, because I realise this. When it's something for you, your foster carers will take it, and go, oh, I'll protect it, things like that, and then wouldn't give it back, for example, because I went through that. Well, actually, no, it's something for the young person to keep. It's something for that child to keep if they feel like they need it. That relevance, it's there, it's in their hands. It's not like you've got to go ask your carer. It's something for that young person, and I feel like that needs to be done. And let's make everyone aware that there are teams available and things, because like everyone said, we have come a long way the past couple of years. We have, but in a lot of areas there is still a lot of work that needs to be done to strengthen areas, to strengthen, the social services team, the council, so let's push it forward. But there needs to be more support, and there needs to be more. Us young people need to know, because I'm very much with Twanda. Until I hit 18, I didn't know I could have a mentor. No, I didn't know there was some services out there. I went through psychiatric and I got medication and everything. That wasn't by my choice. That was by my foster carer's choice and my social worker's choice. And I think we need to have more of a say, and we need to be aware of things a lot more than what we are.
I think is it okay if I comment now? Sorry. So Sharon, I think one of the things that I would say sitting here today is the thing that I am really proud of is how articulate our young people are now and able to give their views, which I'm not confident in the past would have happened. And I think that that's been a real move forward for us, that we now have lots of open forums and opportunities for young people to give their views, whether that's meeting with Councillor Izzy Seacombe, meeting with Monica Fogarty, coming to SLT. There are so many ways that our young people are encouraged now to have a voice and give their views. Mental health is a national issue. We all know that this is one of the key areas that as a country we need to be really working on. One of the things that I think I'll take on board today is about us getting messages out to our young people as clearly and as many times as we can, because we're of the view that we've shared information. At the moment, there is a crisis line that's being developed for young people who feel who are having issues with mental health, that they can ring. We do put that on our Twitter page. We do put on our Facebook page. We do tell people about it. But what I'm hearing today is that there needs to be that consistent, constantly re-giving that message, finding as many ways as we can to keep telling young people about the services that are available to them. Mental health is one of our key areas, as I said, that we're working on, and we're in the middle of actually pulling together our pathway for support for mental health for vulnerable young people, and it's something that's one of our top priorities and an area that we will keep on pushing, because I know, as both Tawanda and Elizabeth have said today, for them it's a really important thing that we get this right. And I think that if you were to speak to most people across the whole country, that would be an area that we all recognise we need to get right. I just want to say that the House project is a national project. It isn't just a Warwickshire project. It's the Warwickshire is part of the National House project, and I believe that Coventry are about to launch their own house projects. So it is something that is growing, and it's something that in Warwickshire we will be looking at growing further. So we've done 2 cohorts now, but we will be looking at further cohort, looking at whether there's an appetite to promote that within the south of the district and within Rugby district, because at the moment it's been within the north of the council. So that is something that is ongoing. We know in the past we haven't got everything right, but we're really committed to getting things right moving forwards, and we're really committed to learning from our young people and hearing their voices. And I think that what I would hope is that Beth and Tawanda are coming along today, and clearly sometimes their experiences will leave us all uncomfortable. We listen to those, we have to sit with how uncomfortable that makes us feel. But what I would say is we have listened. We've developed our children care team, which now takes young people who are looked after at the age of 14 and keeps them till they're 18, following young people's views that actually 16 was a really difficult time for them to change and have a new worker, etc. So I think that we're ongoing learning. We're all learning together, and a key part of our learning is what we hear from our young people.
Thanks, Sharon. I am so sorry, so time is beginning to get away from us, and there's a couple of hands up from members, and just had a message that some of our young people have to leave us quite soon in 6 or 7 minutes. So can I just go to Dan quickly first, and then to Margaret, and Dominic, forgive me, I know that your hand was up before Margaret's, but she has an appointment, I think, at 22. So Dan, Margaret, if you could ask some quick questions, and then perhaps the young people can come in before they have to leave us, those that do. So Dan.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll try to be brief and go over some really quick points, and some of them have been talked about anyway. The things I wanted to go over I talked about earlier, but first of all, thank you, Beth, for your input, and Tawanda for your you obviously sharing your experiences, but also your honesty. It is really helpful. And I think one of the main things, obviously if short on time, is to say, if you're having problems, and we know there are issues with CAMHS across the country and mental health services and access to services, and like you said, you don't want to go in and speak to a stranger straight away and tell them all these personal things. I think we need to make sure there are ways that you can feel comfortable to share that information, whether that's speaking to other people that have been in the same situation, whether that's having access to, what we mentioned earlier, like a portal or a website that's got loads of information on, but also links to various services where you can get support there and then. But that's one of the biggest things for me is making sure that you know there's always someone you can speak to. It doesn't have to be to go through your GP and wait a couple of weeks or months sometimes to speak to someone. And also the crisis team, obviously speaking to a crisis team is not always accessible. We had so many issues with crisis teams across the county and in other areas, Birmingham, and across the Midlands, with people accessing the service, and especially young people and who they speak to. Out of hours access can be awful, so it's not always on the crisis team to get that help. But sometimes if you're not under them or known to them, they can't help for various reasons. So I think having somebody that you can reach out to just to advise them, just to offload and speak to people, can make you feel better, especially if it's someone that's been in that situation, because look, this is what you can do, and having there to someone to take you to the next step or make sure you're getting the support you need. That's one thing. One of the things you mentioned earlier was having YouTube videos. They can be great. I think what we could do as a county, if we could look at having something where we could again put that information to make sure you're all getting the right kind of information. And say you're over in Birmingham, you can't come over to a session in Portland Place in Leamington or Oaks Rugby or anywhere like that, that you can still have access, whether it's virtual or in your own time. If you're busy or you're at college, you can go on there and access these same sessions afterwards to catch up. But the difference to watching YouTube, if we had them in our own place, we could put the same information there, but we could then have it so you can feedback if you've got a question, about that process. Instead of watching YouTube, you can ask something, and then someone can come back. It might be a day later, or in office hours, but you can then have a facility to speak to somebody to get feedback and to change things and to make it work for you. That's one of the biggest things. I will try to be really, really brief because I've really
I think Morgan has to leave in a couple of minutes. So
yeah,
if you could just pause for 1 sec, bring Morgan in, and I'll step back. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I think Shin, that's right, is it? It's Morgan has to leave. Or someone messaged. So Morgan, do you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, if we can get Morgan in, he has to leave by 11:30.
Okay.
Sorry, I've basically been in the background for most of the meeting, but I think it's important to actually run through. I know that we've heard some of the things about what the Warwickshire Youth Council has been doing, but I do think it's important to hear a range of views, because it's been a bit lopsided over the Children in Care Council at the moment. So me and Georgina are the chairs of the Warwickshire Youth Council, and we've made a few notes beforehand to discuss. The life skills thing is something that we are consistently engaged with. Last year, we found that there was an 8% disparity between those who felt they wanted to vote at 16 and those who actually knew about politics. So we tried to work towards actually providing some sort of political education or creating a PowerPoint or, along those lines. Equally, mental health, big priority in the past. We always see it as a priority, and we're always trying to help people's mental health. The local youth forums work very hard on that, and about 2 years ago we did a campaign on mental health, maybe 4 years ago, maybe 3. I've been in so long I don't remember, but we hosted a conference and we brought people together. One of the However, at the moment we're campaigning on the environment, and what's important for us is that we have accessible green transport in the future, because I know that from seeing a couple of tweets from councillors that a plan recently got struck down in the county council, and we've been discussing this and thinking about it, because accessible green transport needs to be a big priority if we want to get to carbon neutral as soon as possible. This isn't just anything, it's a climate emergency for a reason, and that's something we are very, very, very passionate about, and we would like to drive that home and make that clear. Other things that have been mentioned before, we've had discussions around Vets at 16, and last year we campaigned on it. Personally, I'm on the fence about it, but I do feel that often young people get stereotyped as naive when you can be naive at any age. It's possible for a 65-year-old to be very, very naive. It's possible for a 65-year-old to just read something and believe it. I know people like that, my own relatives, unfortunately. So if we are to claim that 16-year-olds are naive and will read anything and, believe anything they read, then why shouldn't we just ban voting altogether? Because we don't know who is going to be, who we can't make assumptions, is what I'm trying to point out, and that's something that we should like to make clear. But I hope I've given a concise and to the point, just brief coverage of what the Warwickshire Youth Council has been thinking about, and we're hoping to engage with more of the county council in the future. So thank you all, and I believe, looking at my watch, that actually I have to leave now. So thank you all very much, and I hope to see you all soon.
Morgan, maybe you could email us, or email, is it Carla, I think, and she can pass on your email to us, and we'll come back to any points that you raise, just given the time constraints. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that'll work. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you. Dan, back to you. Sorry about that, and then I'll bring Margaret in quickly before she has to dash off for 5 minutes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So again, mine will probably be all over the place. I've made notes throughout, and I wanted to go back to Wanda, just to say, you don't always have to have that help and support through certain channels. You can find it in other places, and there's other agencies. And again, for us, it's if we could facilitate something so you could speak to somebody, service users in that secure setting, whether it's over the phone, online, or in person in the county. That's one thing I think we really need to focus on. And for me, I'd like to see us do some work. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't have to cost anything to make some kind of portal, where we put together videos, links, all this kind of stuff. So you've got one place to go to. And again, as Beth mentioned earlier, if she's got an issue with a social worker, who does she go to? So I think we need to make it clear then what the chain of command is, and also if you've got an issue, this is where you go next. A roadmap, and it's so easy to, thanks to technology now, there is access to so much stuff. If you're not in Warwickshire, you can still get access on your phone, on the internet, and there's things we can do. Like we said earlier about checklists and things, for cleaning the property. All the things we take for granted, not everyone knows that. Not everyone is educated about that. As a parent, I think sometimes as well, it's so easy to just do things because you know how it's done. You want it to be made a certain way, but obviously if you're not doing it yourself, everyone learns differently. Some people learn by doing, some people learn by watching or reading. So we're different. So I think it would be really good if we could put something together or start the framework for something that we can build, but obviously get the input of the service users so it's built for you and for as many people as possible. So, if that is a YouTube video for some, that could be great. But with technology and accessibility now, we could transcribe the video as well. Not everyone likes to watch a video. Some people could listen to the audio. That's really, really easy to do. To transcribe it so someone could read that. Just for all the different people and the way they learn. If we could do something to suit as many as possible that we can maintain and build, it doesn't have to be, a big expensive project. It doesn't need to be that. It's something we can do relatively cheap or low cost. But it's something that you could do, take ownership of, but it's secure then if you want to speak to each other, to get help and all these different bits, your views and comments will be secure and private rather than dropping them on social media, because social media is, as you say, it can be a minefield and it's horrendous. Anyone can see what you've wrote, anyone can speak to each other, and it can be awful as good as it is. So I think if we could do that and kind of secure that and facilitate, I think is the word I'm trying to look for, something we could, just make sure it's being used correctly. If that would help, I would like to go for that and, push it forward and do anything we can. But again, I think, I've gone over a few things, and obviously one of the bits as well we talked about really, really early on was making sure you got financial education. To me, that's something, well, all schools should do, not just look after children in care. Schools, we don't learn enough about finance. It's down to parents, and if we're not educated on that, some people are lucky to have parents that are financially sound and teach them about that. Others grow up, get a job, and spend every penny they've got. That is your product you're surrounded sometimes. And if, thanks to technology, luckily people are educating themselves with again, YouTube, online resources. But that is something I think we need to put into all our children, especially the ones that obviously are asking for that help. So the things where you can manage your finances, budget, learn how to get more for your money, and to make it go further. Because it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone, especially when you are on limited budgets and you need to spread it so thin. So I think learning how to look after your money and to get support for that and what to do with it is really important. And the biggest thing I think as well, again, you mentioned it earlier, Elizabeth and Tawanda, is having access to people, making sure you're not getting the wrong influence. We've seen so often people get put in supported housing and they feel they've not got access to people all the time. They'll start to speak to people, hang around with people that'll befriend them, and they will be bad for them. We've all seen about Gemma Hayter and rugby. I lived near Gemma for years, and round the corner from me, we've seen what happened to her. It never happens ever again. And it's not just the worst cases, that is horrendous. But we see people every single day. It might not be as serious as that. It could be bullying. It could be someone taking money off someone. It could be someone, just that constant abuse of neighbours. We've seen people in supported housing, especially some of the areas in rugby where someone's gone and a young person's there, but they are taken advantage of. They might not necessarily have their money taken, but they are taken advantage of by the people around them because they know they're young, they're vulnerable, they haven't got family support, and we need to make sure you've got access to help. If you don't feel secure, you don't feel safe, or you want to speak to somebody, you've got access to that. I think that's really important, just having access to somebody all the time. Again, I don't want to waffle on because I already have, I know that. My notes are all over the place, and I hope we've made the right kind of thing of it. But if anyone wants to add anything else to that or to go back over it, I'm happy. And if we could do something as a group and as a council to facilitate this, I think the best way forward would be some kind of portal. But obviously, with everyone else's ideas and input, I'm all for it, and I'll go for it and do what we can.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. Margaret, do you want to come in quickly?
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, they've already taken my swab test, so I'm fine for a few minutes. I have got to go at 12, though. I just want to say thank you so much for all the young people who have contributed so well today. That's been really, really fantastic. Before I go on to what they said, I just want to touch on the report a bit. I found the report a little confusing because we have two important but separate issues which do slightly overlap. One is the feedback from young people with experience of care, and the other is the feedback from the people on the Warwickshire Youth Council. Yeah. And we need to address both of those. And yeah. I think it's quite understandable that Today we spent most time talking to the youngsters with experience of care because they're our responsibility directly, and we need to get this right. And so just going on, obviously everybody's spoken about mental health and it's so important, but I think we should turn it the other way round. We shouldn't be expecting young people to seek mental health support. It should be there as part of their package right from the start. It should be integrated into their care package. Sorry, I'll just turn that off. Integrated into their care package. And I'm not implying that all young people in care need mental health support, but it should be there if and when they want it, without them having to seek it, and it should be high quality. And so we need to get that sorted out. That's really important. In terms of what the recommendation of this report is, which is about a task and finish group, yeah. I would much rather see a task and finish group focused on the issues that the youngsters with experience of care have raised today. And that obviously they've raised mental health issues, and also I'd include in that actually young people who are carers. If we could somehow embrace both, because they've got similar issues of needing access to life skills, if you like, and needing access to information. So the things that have come up today are mental health, preparation for life, basically. And the one that struck me was, I think it was you, Beth, who said this. Who do you go to if you don't agree with your social worker? That is, or if they're not listening to you. And to me, that stuck with me. And so I think that if we could set up a task and finish group, I think the young people here and others should set the priority agenda for that. So say, these are the things that are important. Now, I don't want to ignore the Warwickshire Youth Council. They've come up with some issues that they feel really strongly about.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not sure that a task and finish group would be the right way forward for them, because most of the things they are concerned about are not within our direct influence, although we could help them to find a way forward. So I think we need to think about that separately.
Yeah, I think maybe suggesting that we meet with them separately, make ourselves available at a time that's convenient to them.
Absolutely, yes, that would. I think that would be good. So thank you so much for those young people who've spoken, and we really need to listen. And I know, Sharon, I know that you've given us some reassurance about things that have changed, but it seems we still have a long way to go, and we need to listen and respond. So thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm just going to bring Dominic in, and then I'll come to you, Beth and Tawanda. I think Tawanda first, but Dominic, if you can come in, and thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much, Chair. I just want to echo some of the sentiments some of our other councillors have made in response to what you've been saying, Beth and Tawanda. Listening to some of your experiences, it's made me. I've really had to sit back in my chair, and it really hits you quite hard. And you've been really honest and really straight up and really raw about everything you said and really real. So just want to say thank you very much, firstly, for doing that, because it's exactly what councillors need to hear. And it's exactly the reason why we have a committee like this, to listen to people like yourselves who are out there experiencing or part of a service that we're providing. So to get that really raw, honest feedback from the front line, I think is really powerful, is really important. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Some of the points I've got here have actually already been covered, but I just wanted to bring a few things up. Beth, you said something that really struck a chord in me about being a care leaver, and that should not be a label. I think that's really important. I think that's maybe a thread that should run through a lot of the things that we're doing. Mental health obviously is a really important thing nationally, and it's something we've touched on a lot. But again, that seems to be a thread that runs through a lot of the issues that come from finding yourself in care or that kind of caring situation. So I think we really need to improve our continuity and totality of care. It really should start in foster care and move all the way through. And I don't think we're really necessarily hitting that. Certainly from your experiences, Beth, things may have been changing, and I appreciate that. And Sharon, you made some pretty strong points on that, so I get it. But I just think that if we are going to tackle some of these wider issues, we really need to have that depth of therapeutic care that runs all the way through. Sharon, you have pointed back that we are providing some therapeutic support to our foster carers, which I think is really important. I think that all foster carers should have a short course in therapeutic parenting as mandatory. And I notice you're working with a local company on that, which I think is really good. But those in care also need that therapeutic support too, and to have an in-house therapeutic team, whether it's outsourced or not, I think is extremely important. So I'm glad some things are doing on that, but I would be interested just to see what that program actually looks like. How are we taking that forward? How are we developing that therapeutic offering to our foster carers, and most importantly those in care? You talked earlier, Beth, about support groups, and how important you feel that offering is, and I completely agree. I think that's a really good idea, and it'd be great if it's something that we can look at developing as an offering a little bit further. Some of the officers might be aware of Maslow's hierarchy of support. I think it's a bit of a pyramid basically, and I think we're not focusing enough on the bottom of that in building that foundation and building that resilience into the young people that we are out there supporting. So that's something I would really like to focus on. But yeah, I just think I would really like to understand how that therapeutic offering is being put forward, how we're looking to develop it, how we're looking to fund it going forward, and I would like to see it expanded as well. But again, just to sign off, thank you very much, Beth and Tawanda, and I've met Adam before. But yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dominic. Tawanda, do you want to come in? You can speak about any of the points raised by Dominic or Margaret or Dan.
Going off from what Dan said about the pyramid, I think that should definitely be used in a lot of situations when you're trying to make these things better. So for like mental health, how you're going to try to tackle it, how you're trying to get it out there, services and stuff like that. I feel like when the people like Dominic, people like you, and people that can actually make a change in this, when they hear about something that's not going too well, I feel like you don't try and build such a foundation to the point where if you were to go at something straight on, you have something to fall back on. I feel that in many situations when you're trying to make something better, you should always have like a plan B to fall back on to sort of get to your plan A. So in terms of that, I think that's a method that many people should definitely think about using when you're trying to when you're trying to accomplish a goal, trying to make something better. And the pyramid method is very effective. I was also going to say, I think there's definitely a strong need for training for foster carers about mental health and how to deal with a child in their care who has mental health issues. And I think that they should also be able to have services for them for their own mental health issues, because I know that having a child who is going through this kind of thing and knowing that you may not be able to help them and that you're trying to help them can strain on the person's mental. And I feel like there needs to be services for both the foster care on how to help them support the child with their mental health and training for them to deal with their own mental health, because not everybody knows how to handle it. And because of that, I felt because of my mental health from previous carers, I feel like because they never knew how to deal with it, they kind of ignored it, or they made it worse by trying to. They would just make it worse by blaming me for having my own mental problems. And for example, one of my friends, like, he was going through mental problems, and he was like making a joke in front of his camera, and she took it the wrong way, and she said that because of his mental problem, he was talking about suicide basically, and he said it in front of her. Like, he said that I'm feeling suicidal, and she said that we can't have you in your house anymore if you keep on acting this way, if you keep having these things. It says you are a danger to more people in our house and everybody around you. Being a child, being told that you can't stay in the house because you have your own mental problems as you are feeling suicidal, that is horrible. They're not taught how to deal with that. And I get both hands, but that's not how you should come across. That's not how you should tell somebody how to deal with that. And that's not how you should help somebody. That's denying them help, making them feel worse. There's not training out there to help the carer, to help support the child. There's not enough of it. I feel like if there was training in place, that could have been sorted out a lot differently. That situation itself. There's not enough training, there's not enough support. And I feel like I think training's done through a whole manual. There's not actually people talking about it. And I feel like when you're doing training, you should probably think about, I know a lot of these services are bringing in young children. I think training for foster carers who are going to be foster caring a child should be trained by people in care or have input from people in care because they know what it's like. They know how it feels to move from home to home. They know what the mental boundaries are. They know everything because they've been through it. And I think that would definitely help to elevate that in training for being in care because I feel like it's quite easy. It's like you do a couple of things, you pass, and you get a child, and you look happy. It's not as easy as that. There's a lot of things that come with the child and supporting them. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. But I feel like you should definitely bring young children, young carers into the mix of training for foster care. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say something, Chair? Sorry, could I just respond? Yeah, I think it's really helpful. Thank you, Tawanda. And I'm really pleased to tell everybody actually that we have our annual fostering conference in October. I was just looking very quickly whilst we were speaking about areas and workshops that are on that, and there's quite a significant input about mental health and carers supporting young people with mental health issues. And in response to Tawanda as well, what we also have at that conference are workshops that are facilitated by young people. And we did the same last year. We had workshops actually last year. They were facilitated by some of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people who spoke really passionately, and actually everybody who attended one of those conferences found it so powerful, speaking about their journey living in a country where they were quite isolated and the impact that had on their emotional well-being. So all those things are very much incorporated into our conference moving forward this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Beth, thanks for waiting.
No worries. Yeah, I just thought of a couple of ideas, and I really support Dan within the idea of potentially doing the portal. I think that is a very brilliant idea, something that is controlled, and I do also think that the young people will be more engaging in that. I also think that instead of all the staff doing all the videos, that us young people can do some videos, especially the older ones that we've had to learn. For example, like a meal, like we can stand in our own home and cook a meal and like talk it through and tell people the recipes and stuff. I think that would be a really good idea. Also with Sharon, just saying as well about the annual conferences. My thought was getting young people actually to some young people to actually come along to them to talk, a bit, briefly, some training on some things that we think is good, some things that we don't think that's good, some really good key points that they do, and maybe get some more training when it comes to how carers deal with certain situations. I think is good. I think like the massive key I find is the young people and I think it would be good if you guys actually use the people that have been there and done it and that can share some light, because maybe we can actually make relationships better with carers and young people, because we have more insight. I think it'd be good to actually like use us as well in a lot of it. And I just want to say how brilliant it is to actually be asked to be a part of this meeting, because there's a lot of people that can actually change things, and these changes are really starting to come into place, and it's brilliant, and it's good to see the new changes that's going to be taking in place. But that's all I really had, was getting us young people more involved, because I feel like us young people can actually help with some training, like in some areas, because we can like say a bit of our story and how we found it, and we can also say like how we would have liked things to have been done differently, especially when it comes to like new foster carers coming in, when they're absolutely oblivious, don't know what they're going to be dealing with. I think that would be a really good time to actually go, well, this is some of the situations you're probably going to be facing, you know? I think that's just my thought on it.
Okay. Right. Thank you. We're going to need to wrap up soon. Tyler, Adam, you've both got your hands up, but spare me 1 second. John, would you like to come in briefly?
I was just going to very briefly just pick up the issue that Adam raised about young carers, and just say that I'm quite happy to take away an action that we speak to the young carers. I know that they'll be open to a conversation about what support they're offering, so definitely pick up that issue that Adam raised earlier on. And I think, I guess my only other comment really is that I think it's been really helpful to have, thank you for all the young people who contributed. I think that kind of all of the particular messages around sort of mental health issues will be really helpful for us when this committee meets with RISE in the future, and obviously that's coming up in the next few months as well, so weeks. So and that will be really useful. So perhaps we can collate some more of that information and feedback from young people for members for that meeting as well, which might be useful. And I'm conscious we need to move with the agenda, Chair. So unless there's anything else, I think probably we're from the young people's point of view, and Shin and Sharon, I think we're ready to sort of go back to the recommendations if you're happy with that, unless there's any more questions.
I think fair to give Adam had his hand up, so so if you can both come back in, Adam first, just a minute or two, if you could, briefly. So Adam, over to you.
Yes, that is great points that everyone has shared. During lockdown, what has the council actually done to support children's mental health in this crisis? Because I've been following Warwickshire County Council on social media, and I haven't seen a lot about it. What has the council done to support it?
Thank you. We'll get that answered for you. Tawanda?
I was going to say, I think his name was Dan. He has brown hair, glasses, beard.
Dominic?
No. That's Dominic? The one who was in the chair?
Dan's on screen. Dan's got the white top on, glasses. They've both got glasses and a beard.
Oh, okay. Okay, he was talking about...
Oh, no, I've got glasses. No, apologies.
He was talking about the portal. I think that's a very good idea. I think, and how to access different services and stuff like that. But I wanted to ask him, what plans does he have in place? What kind of services do you think you're going to provide on the portal? Who are you going to involve? Not only young people, but like, who else are you going to involve to make this a bigger solution? Is it going to be an app? Is it going to be a website? And other question is, how is there? I think it would be a good idea for like the portal, not only to provide services, but like be able to kind of have numbers and book appointments for it, maybe, because it's something that can help people access different services to help. So maybe be asked to book appointments with them and stuff like that. But that's some of my questions.
Shin, do you want to come in? If you could, and John as well, if either of you could talk to the points raised by Adam and Tawanda, and then we'll wrap up.
you want me to come in first just to answer the question that Adam gave? I mean, there's been a lot of, obviously, we commission RISE to provide mental health services to young people. They've had a 24-hour, 7 days a week telephone line for young people to access mental health support. And we've done a lot of social media campaigns about mental health support, making sure that people do talk to people about how they're feeling and gain access to from their, whether it's talking online or directly to teachers, to parents, to carers, to others about how you're feeling. And we've also had a big campaign about suicide prevention too. And we've done quite a few innovative things with RISE around TikTok and other things, which young people, actually in the Youth Council, completed videos about how to access that support and really engage with young people. But happy to talk to you about it a bit more, Adam, and to the other members of the council, so that we can get your views on what else we could do to engage young people and support. Perhaps invite RISE to come along to one of your meetings to talk to you a bit more about that, so you can give them your ideas. Chin, did you want to?
Yes, I was just going to say that the information has been very useful. I mean, there's some things clearly that need to be discussed outside of the overview and scrutiny committee meeting, and I think that some of the conversations we could begin to think about. I think there was a good suggestion earlier that was made by Councillor Bell, I think, which is focusing on mental health, because clearly that was a big issue that's been identified, which we're aware of. There is no surprise, and young people within the Warwickshire Youth Council have identified that as quite a big issue for themselves as well. So not to overlook that. And also preparation for life. Again, Warwickshire Youth Council have raised that as quite a significant issue. So I was just curious to know, with the recommendations, quite happy to look at some adjustment to those, and what it is that the committee had in mind, and whether we could begin to look at focusing on recommendations and move it forward. And of course, come back in about 12 months' time to provide an update to Overview and Scrutiny Committee on what progress has been made on the discussions we then hold.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll come back to Margaret in a sec. Perhaps you can just refresh my memory. But first, Dan, do you want to come back on Tawanda's point?
Oh, yeah, can you hear me, Chair?
I
can.
can.
If that sounds loud, just let me know. But yeah, to answer Tawanda, the booking part, first of all, would depend on, which stakeholders we had involved, so, and which services. That's possible, but again, that'll be down to who we had involved, and there's some really, really easy ways to pull that together, and there's some expensive, long-winded ways, link everything together. But just getting a portal together, it doesn't have to be expensive. That is something we could get the motion or get into place. Yeah, I think as well. It depends. Obviously, we need some conversations after this, and as we talk about getting a task and finish group, we could then talk about the best way to do that, whether it's as the council or whether that is approaching Carver and working with a charity to keep it separate from the council. Those kind of bits, I think we'd need to discuss afterwards, the ins and outs. Obviously, as a council, we'd be limited on what we could do and budgets, whereas it doesn't have to cost a lot of money if it's done by a charity. So I think we'd need to have that conversation afterwards. And again, it doesn't have to be set in stone. Just doing something like this and working on it. If we could get it as a piece of work that we can start, we can always add to it, get your input, and keep it fluid. It doesn't have to be quite rigid. It's something we could keep going on. So yeah, we could. The appointment part would be the difficult part, but again, it would just depend on who you're working appointments with and the services that are available. But I mean, to start off with, if it was a couple of people from the county council and a couple of different services, there's some really, really easy ways we could do that, so they can just access a calendar, give us their availability, and you can choose through that. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about that anytime, if we do it in task and finish or afterwards with officers, whatever's easiest.
Okay. Margaret, can you just refresh my memory? Your suggestions to amend the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm suggesting that Well, I'll use the term task and finish group, but it says here a cross-party group, which the task and finish groups are. I wonder if it's possible to expand that, say cross-party and include young people with the relevant experience in this group, so they are part of the group that look at the priorities for young people with care experience, and also those who are young carers. And so, first of all, they set the agenda, and then we have some things that we can focus on and get things moving forward. So if you want words, Chairman, I'm struggling here a little bit. So the second part, committee considers a cross-party working group, including young people with relevant experience, to give impetus to specific priorities raised by young people with care experience and those who are young carers. That's what I suggest. And having said that, Chair, now I've got to leave. I've got another meeting. I'm sorry. I'll leave it with you. Sure, others will have views. Thank you.
Okay. Jonathan.
Chair, I'm happy to second Margaret's proposal, but then I think we also need to add something just to say that we are going to meet with I forget the issues that Morgan was talking about. We just need to record that we are going to meet about them as well. So I think it's right to separate out possibly some of the care and the other issues. So I'd like to mention both.
Yeah, I agree. Any other members? Any dissenting voices from members? Are everyone happy with that? Recommendations amended as out by Margaret. Add the additional one that Jonathan just mentioned. Any issues from officers with the recommendations changing? No? Okay. Helen, have you got that?
I've got that, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. And Beth, you did have your hand up, so did you want to have the final say?
Yeah, I'll just come to mind that the portal page would be really good. But to have the pages to benefit different age groups. So I know that we are really doing the Children Young Council, well, to advertise that on their page, and then to go into and then have a separate page, for independency. So that's where we can have all the cooking and the cleaning products all categorised, and things like that. So it's one page for everybody, but then different tabs to take you to the actual place where you want to go and stuff like that. And I really think it'd be really beneficial as well, somewhere on that, to have a page that introduces the team and who and in what areas it runs. So young people, social workers, ROs, etc. So it's all known there. I think that would be really good, and I think young people would be on board with that. Something nice, something colourful, something to really engage, and something that can just keep being added. So when that's finally up, if us young people think, well, actually this is missing, they can come to into the council, then they can come to the care leaver forums, and then we can bring it higher up to SIN and stuff like that, and we can get the improvements put in. I think that's a good step in getting things forward.
Okay. Yeah. It's an idea. Definitely. Dan is an IT whiz, so I'm sure that he'll help the officers all that he can. But yeah, it's a good idea. Okay. Recommendations agreed. Just want to say thank you to all the young people, to Beth, to Tawanda, to Adam, who are on the call. Anyone else who's on the call who didn't participate, if you feel like after today there's something you want to say, do email, get in touch with us. But thank you for joining us. And I know Dom spoke of Maslow's hierarchy. The one thing that really hit me was all three of you, Adam, Tawanda, Beth in particular, your willingness to bear that burden of personal responsibility to help those going through the journey you've been on or are on. I think that's incredibly impressive, encouraging. It really struck me. So thank you. And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, if you'd like to. I doubt it'll be as exciting as this item, though. Right, thank you. On to item 5 is the council plan. And Ian, Bud, I believe, is going to introduce this. I hope. Is Ian with us?
He doesn't seem to be with us at the moment.
Oh.
We'll see. He was here earlier. Let me see if I can bring him in.
Okay. In Ian's absence, is there anyone who can take the item? And it was all going so well. The problem we have is that item 6, I think Ian was going to introduce as well.
He was.
Okay, right, well, let's just go to item 7. I think Calvin's with us, isn't he? And let's see if we can find Ian. But Calvin, if you could introduce item 7.
I am here.
Brilliant. Update the child protection.
Okay, in terms of, in case people don't know me, I'm Calvin Smith. I'm the service manager for children's safeguarding and support. So effectively, I line manage the district children's teams, our Edge of Care services, our Strengthening Family service that provide an intensive child in need service. So in terms of child protection, all but about 25 children who are with the Children with Disabilities team sit within my remit. And about 2.5 years ago, I was given a strategic lead for child protection within the county. In terms of what the report does and the recommendations, firstly, it just wants to give you an update of where we're at in terms of our child protection services in Warwickshire and how we got there, which is basically a programme of themed audits that we've been doing to seek to continually improve the service we provide, and ask for your endorsement to continue that that themed audit process. As we work through the report, basically it started 2.5 years ago because we were in a position that we really didn't want to be in terms of the numbers of children we had on child protection plans. They were really out of line with our statistical neighbours, and many children were on plans that lasted a significantly long period of time. So we introduced this programme of themed audits where the auditors are actually using about 15 to 20 members of staff. They're key managers within the child protection process, so team leaders that chair strategy discussions, the IROs that chair conferences, service and operation managers. We come together as a group, audit together as a group, and it really is an action learning process that we try and introduce. At the end of it, a report's produced with recommendations to change practice. That then goes out to key players within the child protection process. So it's delivered to all social workers, for example. Some of the reports have been taken to key safeguarding partnerships and the safeguarding partnership itself. If we could move down the next page, it would be helpful. I don't know who's, oh, there you go. And what it's done in terms of just a summary, our child protection numbers from being really out of line are now below our statistical neighbour average, not the lowest, but below our statistical neighbour average. The numbers of children you'll see as we go through the report on long child protection plans, we've understood that better, and now they're again below our statistical neighbour average. We were having real problems around getting to child protection case conferences within 15 days of a strategy discussion. We've made some changes following 2 sets of audits, and that now seems to be on track. And we're currently working on repeat child protection plans where we seem to be out of line again with our statistical neighbours. What I would say is, though, this process is not just about trying to make the stats look good, which clearly is important in terms of national returns, but it's been very much about trying to make sure the experience for children and families going through the child protection process is much better. So we've done a lot of work about trying to include the parents' participation in the meetings, getting the child's voice much better, making our plans smarter, and so on. I guess we've got a simple goal, really, in terms of, for me, it's trying to be the best child protection service in the country. We want children in Warwickshire to be safe, for parents to feel supported through that process if at all possible.
In terms of the financial implications, just because it was on the agenda, there hasn't been any really in terms of additional cost. All the audit processes have been done within existing resources. And actually what it's allowed by, you'll see as we brought down the child protection numbers, to transfer resources away from what is a relatively expensive process in terms of child protection and court work into, for example, the new Children in Care 14 Plus service. Staff came out of my service to move into that team to make that possible. We moved staff from the children's teams into the Strengthening Families team to put an early intervention service in a sort of lower level of child in need to stop those cases escalating. And we've also been able to expand our edge of care services, like setting up and building upon the systemic team. If we move down to the next page, I mean, just to show you where we were really 2.5 years ago, there were 592 children on child protection registers in Warwickshire. That meant you were 50% more likely to be on a child protection plan in Warwickshire than our statistical neighbours. It was just completely out of line. When we did a piece of work around sort of research nationally, and then the first audit we did, there was no reason for that. There was, other than the system had probably become pretty risk averse. So in terms of when we audited, looking at strategy discussions, case conferences, at every single level, we found children that didn't need to be within the child protection process. I think we just found over slightly 12% of the group on child protection plans that we didn't think the criteria even met. It was interesting, just shortly after the audit, actually Ofsted came in for a focused audit, and they also found a similar thing, that we had children on child protection plans that really shouldn't have been there. And actually, sometimes it's easy to engage with families and get them to participate when it's not child protection, because it's quite an anxiety-provoking and process for people, and trying to get them engaged in that is quite hard. So the recommendations that came out of it, and actually what the audit did, was that we looked at 80 children that went through the process, and 80 children that went through child protection processes, and came up really with quite simple recommendations. We said to managers that do call it child protection if you need to, but always think, can it be child in need? Can you work with this family in a different way? And then went and explained to people in the system that are involved in the system that actually we felt that they were being relatively risk averse. If we continue to move down the page, onto the next page actually, on this table here it shows the progress we've made in terms of rates per 10,000. So last year we were below our statistical neighbour average. We're not the lowest. Last year Essex, which is an outstanding local authority, and Leicester, who's one of our statistical neighbours, they're a good local authority. And they're both below us. We're currently doing some work with Leeds in partnership around restorative practice. And actually, while we're on 25.1, which I was boasting about to them, they pointed out they're on 23%. And rates per 10,000, I guess they're important in terms of giving you an indication of what other people are up to. But the audit themselves, it's much more important to say, is the child protection process working, and are we keeping children safe? After we completed that audit, and it takes quite a while to embed them, six months on, we did another audit, because what we were experiencing was a number of our children were staying on plans for really long periods of time, and we wanted to understand what that was about. And fundamentally, when we again audited 80 cases and looked through it, what we discovered, and what we did was look at the child protection plan at the initial case conference, and then 9 months later to see why were these children still on plans. And when we looked at them 9 months later, we found that in 34% of the cases, actually, we hadn't started to provide a service for them. They were on waiting lists for more assessments. And quite often the assessments simply weren't necessary. We knew what they needed in terms of direct work around parenting, and direct work around, most often, domestic abuse, because about 60% of our families on child protection plans, there's a domestic abuse element. And we were tying up our system, waiting for further assessments, rather than targeting the work into doing the direct work with families. So we deliberately moved away from doing quite long and complicated parenting assessments when they weren't necessary, and put the resources into doing direct work. And if we move down again, what's happened over time is you'll see in table 2, where we were 2 years ago was 5.9% of our children were on plans when they came to an end that had been on a plan for over 2 years, well above our statistical neighbour average. Last year it was 3%, and now we're below statistical neighbour average, and now we're down to 2.3. And simply what that's been about is targeting the work, the direct work that's required. Most families do not ask for further assessments, and actually they know what their problems are. Most professionals know what their problems are. It is about working with them in a more timely manner. And I was really quite shocked when I did the audit, because the idea that at 9 months there were 35% of those families that were still on plans because we hadn't delivered them a service in terms of an assessment. It wasn't about their cooperation or the lack of engagement or willing to take part. They simply couldn't get off a plan because we didn't do an assessment that we didn't necessarily need. In fact, we've rerun the audit, and positively, because through all the audits we've looked at things like, were the plans particularly smart, were they in simple English, were they involved with involving the child's voice and parents much more. All of those things have improved, but actually when we recently completed the audit again, now there aren't long queues waiting for parenting assessments and domestic abuse risk assessments. There is unfortunately still a list of people waiting for direct work, so we're trying to resolve that, put more resources into direct work services. But it has meant that people are on plans for much shorter periods of time, which is really good. The next thing that we focused on, there was a couple of audits around this, was the timeliness of our getting to initial child protection case conferences. I don't know if you understand how the process works, but for working together, if you convene a strategy discussion, so you have to believe that there's a sort of a child at risk of or has suffered significant harm, you convene a strategy discussion. If that strategy discussion decides that there's a need to go on to a Section 47 investigation, so a child protection investigation, you then have 15 days to get to an initial child protection case conference. You won't always get there in 15 days because sometimes it's incredibly complex. If you've got sort of children that are being traumatized around sexual abuse, or there's multiple victims and so on, you just can't do it in 15 days. But actually, I think it's a good national indicator, because families shouldn't be waiting either. It's to want to know what's going on for those 15 days is quite difficult. We were very much out of line with national figures. Although when we move down to the table, you'll see actually we did seem to be doing better in the past, but it was about how it was being calculated at the time. Because what you're supposed to do is count it from the first strategy discussion. Warwickshire got into a habit of having one strategy discussion, having the investigation, and having another strategy discussion, and counting the 15 days from the second one. So actually some investigations could go on for weeks and weeks and weeks, but it does allow you to get to 100%. That's not what working together says at all. And what they're really clear about is it convenes the 47 and then the 47 process, which is managed by social workers and their managers in consultation with other professionals. That makes the decision. You don't need another meeting to delay the process and slow it down, which is the last thing you want to do really when there's children at risk. So we reminded people of what working together actually says. We changed all the documentation around it and tried to change the culture. That documentation is much more now based on a sort of a restorative approach. Families don't come to strategy discussions, but our strategy discussions start with the voice of the child and the parents within it, and try to make sure that we represent their views throughout and are clear what actually needs to change. So don't just focus on risk, but also what needs to change, and start to think about what you can put in place to change it. And over the last period since we've done this, and it did take a while, I'd say, to change the culture and get it embedded, we are now performing much better. I don't know if people look at this, the last one being data set, actually it fell back down to 71% last time, but that was 9 children. And when we do get the reports out, we go back to all the teams and find out what's gone on. Of the 9 children, 3 of them were on holiday. So actually, because we wanted the parents at the meeting, we postponed the meeting, so it's sort of purposeful. And there was some drift on some others, but we've spoken to those managers and reminded them of the processes. But again, it has delivered an improvement. And I'd anticipate next year when we do the return, our figures will be above the national average. That's clearly our goal. If we move down a bit further, something that's been deteriorating of late actually is numbers of children on repeat child protection plans. Historically, we did pretty well on this. As our child protection numbers have come down, not in the first year of them coming down actually, but in the past year, the percentage of repeat plans has been increasing. So we're in the process of doing an audit on the 15th of, it says in this report, the end of September, it's the 15th of October. So we've done the background research around it, we've got the questionnaire prepared, but we do want to understand what this is about. Part of what it's about, however, is that actually the numbers of repeat plans haven't changed significantly, really, but there are now, as a percentage of the sort of the size of the child protection population, it's a much bigger percentage. Actually, when we report on this, we report on repeat plans within 2 years and repeat plans over the life of the child. And over 2 years, that's actually falling. And over the life of the child, which is this table of reports for the national indicator, actually the average timescale between a new plan and the previous plan is 42 months, so 3.5 years. You clearly couldn't keep a child on a plan that long, so I think there probably is some success there, but we are going to come up with some recommendations about can we bring this figure down, and it's probably what we're going to do. Don't want to prejudge it, but be a bit more proactive about it. So when we do close child protection plans down, to actually go back to families maybe at 6 months, 6 months, 9 months, and ask them how they're doing, do they need any support or not. In fact, that's something we're doing currently with because of the COVID situation. All children that had their plans closed over the last 2 years, which is 1,071, I think. And there's 517 that are no longer still open to us, because many are still open to us, that we are going back to visit those families because there is sort of evidence across the country that they're a particularly vulnerable group and at risk during the COVID situation, especially when they weren't in school. So we're visiting all those families now. So that's the audit we're currently working on. And we're sort of hopeful. I don't think it's quite as bad as the figures say, because the numbers haven't risen massively. It's much more that the pool of child protection numbers has actually fallen, so that the percentage is much bigger. If we carry on going down, just some other things that people might be of interest. This table is quite interesting in that although our child protection numbers have fallen quite significantly, like I said earlier on, we were really clear with the managers and the decision makers within the child protection process. If you think it's child protection, still call it child protection and begin that process. And if you look at the top line, actually our child protection numbers, especially this last year compared to the previous one, have actually gone up slightly. There's no big difference. We are beginning child protection processes, but then finding different ways to work with families to keep them safe. And quite often they're more willing to engage with us because it is, as I said before, it's pretty scary for many families being on a child protection plan. And they're probably easier to engage with on a child in need plan. And often you provide the same services, you can keep them still safe, and you can make it child protection again at any point in time. So if we move down a bit, there's some things that we monitor loads of things around child protection because obviously it's how we identify what the next audit's going to be on. But they're not all being focuses of audits, but the work we've been doing does seem to be impacting on other areas. So if we just move up a little bit for the table, just move the report up. Just there you go. Stop. So actually, this is this is just me because I'm just curious because the structure, our management structure, and how we've line managed the teams that deliver child protection has changed over a period of time. And 7 years ago, I used to be a service manager for rugby, and actually very much had a child protection system that was district based. So we didn't provide a sort of a consistent approach at all, in my view. There's some people with their hands up, Chair. Do you want me to take questions at the end or as we go along?
I think get to the end if you don't mind.
Okay. It's almost over.
Thank you, Carl.
So if you look at the sort of 7 years ago, when they were managed very differently on a district basis, you received a very different experience of child protection across Warwickshire County Council, with the area that had the highest rates of child protection being Nuneaton and Bedworth District, and the lowest being Stratford. In fact, we did a piece of research with a university 5 years ago that was looking at county councils and their response to child protection, and its conclusions were a bit of an eye-opener for us, because they were saying quite often we didn't take account of things like poverty, and often saw poverty as a sort of a risk factor rather than a different way of working with it. But say 7 years ago, and across that piece, we've gradually brought the line management structure for child protection, and instead of a district-based structure, into a central structure. So the majority of child protection cases are in teams that I now line manage. This auditing process involves all the teams, including children with disabilities. And when we do roll out and try and change culture and practice, we try and do that across the piece. And I think it's really good to see that the gap has narrowed between the districts now. In fact, probably the most interesting line at the moment on it is the sort of purpley pink one, which is Warwick, which is incredibly low at the moment at 16 per 10,000. And actually, we're doing a piece of work to find out what that's about. Because just as I think you can have too many children on child protection plans, clearly you can have too few. So it wasn't something we've deliberately done, but actually the change of practice is impacting upon things like the rates across the county and providing a better service across the county, really. If we go down a bit further, I guess this talks about narrowing the gap and using the wanting data set. But it's not just the audits that have been delivering this, nor is it just my service area that manages it. So under sort of 5.16, it's just an idea of other stuff that's going on. So like Matt at the moment is a service manager for the MASH EDT initial response, is very much doing work around trying to improve the timeliness and consistency. And definitely since we've had the MASH in place, so there's a single front door for child protection referrals, I think that threshold to our partners is much more consistent and is better. The Marina Kitchen is doing some work at the moment. In terms of delivering child protection training to schools and reviewing and redesigning that, and again trying to explain what our process is, talking about the pathway to change, our restorative assessment model that we're using. Sally Nash is doing important work around safeguarding, particularly around contextual safeguarding, given the sort of the big themes around child exploitation, be that criminal or sexual exploitation. There really are themes that our sort of more traditional child protection processes struggle with, where they sort of focus on abuse within the family and sort of managing risky parents, whereas contextual safeguarding is much more acknowledging there's risks out in the community, but those children still have a right to be protected, and the child protection process should address those too. So Sally's doing that piece of work. And Sharon, who was speaking earlier, obviously from corporate parenting, some of the most vulnerable young people we've got were with us today. They're in our child protection, they're in our looked after teams, and actually you do have to think the unthinkable there as well. We do have children that are abused in care. Sadly, even 7 years ago, we had a child that died in our foster care at the hands of a foster carer. So Sharon makes sure that's kept on the agenda too. So it is a team effort to try and constantly improve our child protection processes. Want to come down a bit more? I think we're virtually at the end. So really, it just comes back to the sort of recommendations and so on. Again, we do think. I think that the audit process we've done has delivered significant improvements, but not just in terms of statistics, also in terms of improving a much more restorative child protection process, one that values and involves parents much more, that adopts a model of safe uncertainty, and we want to see that continuing. We do think the audit process is a way to continue doing that. And as soon as we finish this one with the endorsement of the members, obviously, we'd like to begin to look at other ones. For example, at the moment, probably the only other indicator that's a bit out of line with our statistical neighbours is the numbers of children that go on to child protection plans just for 3 months and then they close, which is quite strange. I guess I think it's unlikely really that you're going to make significant change in 3 months with a family and then test it out. But our rates in that have been rising. So that's end.
Thanks, Calvin. Appreciate it. Open the floor up to members. And Jonathan, your hand was up first, so please come in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Calvin, for presenting that. I have to say, most of what you said was absolute music to my ears. I have to say, over the years, I've always been nervous when we've said, oh, we're going to bring this in line with our statistical neighbours or this in line with statistical neighbours, in case we ended up doing it by massaging thresholds and children missing out. But actually, you've been really clear here, showing that, you know, it's brilliant that you've been able to take resources away from court work and put it at earlier interventions. And to kind of summarise some of what you said, it's like, let's stop having meetings about meetings and let's get on and do the direct work that's needed. And I just think the approach that you've taken us through today is just really, really positive. And I'm just delighted to read about or to hear about it. And just on that direct work thing, you said you have got still some weights around that direct work. Would it be possible next time we have this kind of presentation just to hear about whether that weight for direct work is reducing, some kind of figures on that over time? Because I just think that seems to be something that summarises what you're trying to do. Are we actually doing the work with families that's needed to support them and move things forward?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that next time. I mean, just to reassure you, we, as part of the transformation programme, for example, one of the big weights was around domestic abuse work, where again we were doing lots of focus on very big, cumbersome assessments, which are sometimes necessary, but less time on doing the direct work. So there's a new manager there, Rachel, who is very much trying to focus more on direct work, but there's also been additional resources put into that area from the transformation programme. So there's some new staff to do those assessments, but there's also 5 new staff members and a team leader to work with fathers. I mean, overwhelmingly the domestic abuse is by fathers. And we're involved in this Caring Dads programme. It's an evidence-based programme that started in Canada. One of the leads have rolled it out, but it's really positive because actually it allows us locally to do some direct work with perpetrators for once, where often we end up putting them into Coventry or somewhere to do that piece of direct work. So it's bringing it much more at home and trying to engage those people. But yeah, happy to show out some improvement. We are trying to direct resources there already, just to reassure you, Jonathan, Councillor.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And yeah, I just to come back very briefly on that is that, yeah, I've worked and supported with men over the years, and just that feeling that they did just get so caught up in the assessments, and that when they were at that moment, maybe when they were prepared to consider change, they just were still tied up in endless wait for assessments rather than getting that support in the window that they were ready to receive it. And so I think that's really positive again to hear that.
I think the other thing is that we have to recognise there's a real continuum of domestic abuse. You know, I mean, sadly, we've got someone working at the moment where an abuser killed a person, killed the other parent. But at the other extreme, you've got people that it's overwhelmingly around verbal disagreements between one another and trying to improve that relationship. And actually, I think there's been a tendency at times to treat them all the same almost and have the same package. Well, at one end, you do need that complex assessment. At the other one, you can get on with doing the direct work, and you can engage with those perpetrators in a very different way. And Caring Dads definitely offers that opportunity. Some very positive feedback, really good piece of NSPC research around it. And so it's really good.
Brilliant, thank you.
Pam.
Yes, hello. Thanks, Calvin, for that. That's really very interesting piece of work there. I'm concerned about the allegations against foster carers and how we're dealing with that, particularly the POP meetings. I don't know whether you have done any work on that, but it seems to be that quite often these are quite slow to take off, and then the feedback to foster carers is slow or indecisive. So I don't know whether you've got anything in this piece of work that audits that as well.
We've not audited that so far. I would say I think it is improving, Councillor. When Ofsted came, not this time the pause visit, but the one before, we had a service that was really struggling in terms of timeliness. We didn't have permanent members of staff in post, so we were using agency staff and so on. Following that, it's definitely the case that those people are permanently now. We've increased the resource within the LADO service. In terms of the timeliness, I don't line manage that service actually. It's done under Joe Davis. It may well be it sometimes appears quite slow. Sometimes that, especially when it's around the POP process, obviously you're doing the child protection bit, but there's also potentially a HR process going on and also a criminal investigation. So I know I recently was asked to step in to do a complex strategy discussion which related to a foster carer. And while there's aspects of it we can move on and progress, a big part of that case is going to be dependent upon the criminal process, and sadly sometimes that moves more slowly than us. But it's definitely something we could take back, because I'm confident the LADO system is better now than it was 3 years ago. But I think it's a good idea that we audit that part of the process as well. It's a smaller group and sort of specialist group, but to look at it more closely would be good, because it was previously a weakness, I think, for us when Ofsted were here. So prepare for Ofsted, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a weakness there, and I think it's, unfortunately, I think we will lose foster carers unless we get this sorted out, because there is a feeling, I think, amongst foster carers that they're often let down in this situation. But the POP process can run alongside child protection process. So it's something that I think maybe should come into this sort of audit, because if we don't do it, I think foster carers feel that they're not getting a fair hearing. And I think the criminal process obviously is running alongside it at the same time often, and that makes it even more difficult for HR and for the foster carers involved in this, and ultimately for the children who are going to be involved in this. So yeah, I think we need to definitely have a look at that and bring that a bit more up to speed. The other thing that I'd like to see looked at in some sort of audit form is the feedback that we get from young people following any sort of investigation. I don't think we're very good at that, because maybe we go back a year or so after, as you said, but it's the feedback from the young people, because I think there's a huge feeling of isolation when they've been through an investigation, and I think that doesn't really matter the age of the child, but there is a feeling of isolation and a feeling that they're not involved in the process. It's something that's being done to them, and I can't see any of that sort of feedback reflected in the audit process, and I would like to see that, because I think that will give us a lead to how successful we are in looking after our young people for their future, and particularly hearing what we've just heard today from all the young people that joined. I think that's something that we definitely need to take into account.
I mean, obviously, every young person that goes through the child protection process has the right to an advocate, a child rights person from Barnardo's. What we have done in the audits is look for the child's voice in that process and feedback from the child, so that things like the strategy discussion, now asking what the child's views within the strategy discussion is central to that. I think it's been put much more on the agenda around the conferences as well, and we are looking at how they get participation within the conferences, and not just the initial one but the review ones as well, because sometimes, given the 15 days timescale, it is hard to get them an advocate within the first 15 days. So that there are mechanisms that we do actively try and get the feedback from children, and that in every single one of the audits we've done, the voice of the child we look for. And I think one positive of it, when you look at the details of the audits, is that the participation and voice of the child does seem to be improving. I think it's really important. I have to say it, because actually I think sometimes you assume things around child protection. You're there to protect, and we don't always ask a child what it's like for them. I mean, some of the things we have to do in child protection is quite peculiar, really. What we get judged upon is, and we have to give a return upon, is the visit in the family home. And actually, we did do a piece of work about 9 years ago now, asking young people that had come into care what they thought of the child protection process. And they said, well, why would we tell you what's going on in our house when the person that's abusing me is in the next room? I just don't feel safe there. So we do encourage our social workers to take people out, make sure they go away from the family home as well, which isn't part of the national return, because the national return is to do it in the family home. But yeah, we can definitely focus on it a bit more.
Yeah, and I think the way that we ask children, young people, how they feel about the whole process is really important. And I think often filling a form in is something they don't want to do, but and sometimes they don't trust. There's a lack of trust there, so it's very difficult, and you have to get alongside the children. But this idea of isolation that comes across when you talk to young people is something that's very strong, particularly in this process. And I would like to see something reflected in the audit about what we actually do to look at how the voice of the child is reflected in that. What else did I have down here? I'm concerned about the repeat plans that we have to do. So it's really looking at that in a bit more depth. Why are we having repeat plans coming up as often as they do? And I know it's not unusual, and it's right across all counties have the same sort of thing. But is there something that we can do? I think we need to look at that in a bit more detail to make sure that we, and closure is the other thing for, actually when you finish the piece of work, we've had some that I've come across where people were still, are they still watching us? Are they still keeping an eye on us? Are we still under the microscope? And I think that's something, actually getting to the end of the process and looking at that in more detail and how that is dealt with, because I've met people several years down the line and they still feel they're under the microscope. So I think we need to consider how young people and their families feel about that as well.
Just to reassure you on that, I guess we've just recently introduced not just restorative agendas to strategy discussions, but also to conferences, and explain to social workers how we expect you to engage with parents in that process. So we do expect that the conference report goes to a family 3 days before the conference, that you sit down with them and go through it, and actually that you draft a plan together. Overwhelmingly, they know what their problems are, they know what their issues are and how to resolve them. And it is trying to give them back some power so they understand the system better. I think for restorative practice for us, if you go to a conference historically, you're probably going to be a parent that's going to sit in the room. You're going to be the last person to come in the room. You'll be outnumbered by professionals about 5 to 1, even more to 1. A good conference would be where there's more family members than there are professionals, in my view. We're also, transformation program, we've been able to expand the family group conferencing system. So we are offering family group conferences to families in the child protection process as well, to try and give them some ownership and control around the plan. We can't make families change, in my view. You can enable and support them to change, but you do have to engage with them to do that. And that's what restorative practice is about. So I think there is evidence to show that we're getting better at it. We can clearly always improve, but we are getting better at those things, I think.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Dan.
Oh, I am here. Yeah. Virtually. Thank you. Thanks, Calvin. I thought, going on Pam's last point, I would like to hear from, I don't know what kind of feedback we get from, not necessarily parents of the children involved in the conference, but from the family members that might be more involved than parents and, quite helping the parents or have quite a lot of involvement, in parenting the children that are looked after because of the issues with the parents and their support and involvement. But do we get a lot of feedback from them as well, how we can improve the process?
Yeah, we have a feedback app that we encourage all of our social workers to go to children with and parents with on a regular basis and ask, and they feed it and give us it back. We often get unsolicited feedback as well. I recently had an email that was feeding back from a young person who, during the child protection process, had really given this social worker in an incredibly hard time. And then they were talking to their social worker and the children in care team, and they just wanted they went back and said sorry, and how important they'd been in their life and the difference they'd made by them, in that case, actually removing them from their parents' care. I mean, I'm sure you know, but the vast majority of children that go through the child protection process stay with their families, And I like Pam, I want to know more about the repeat child protection plans. I think it is a success. Between the last plan and the new one is 3.5 years. I think we need to actively engage with those families in between. But back to your question, Dan, yeah, we do actively try and get feedback from families. I think we can do more because actually, although we ask people on a 3-monthly rota to go back and ask children and families, sometimes I get a bit worried they're going to sort of select the ones that are going to be positive about us, and you don't always. It's nice to know the positive things, but you probably learn more sometimes of the people that have had slightly more difficult experiences with us. We can do more about it, and we are trying to do more about it. In fact, one of the items on my to-do list is to write to my teams again with the app once more, because we've got new staff joining us at the moment, to remind them of the app and use the app in terms of feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And then the only other part, I think you mentioned it, sorry, Chair, is the time between plans, so 3.5 years. On 5.10 of the report, it says obviously this isn't an option, it's too long, and we need to look at different approaches and how we can keep going back there. And then 5.11 underneath that then mentions again the proactive approach and how we can do it between 3 and 6 months, and what we can do. Is that going to be something we're still working on, and we're going to have a process where we have touch points, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
I guess I never like to prejudge the audits, but before people sit down and actually look at files, what I do is look at the data and so on, and I'm sure that's going to be a recommendation. I think it was really interesting. Nigel Minns, the boss, contacted us, having gone to the directors meeting, and the minister was there, and drew the attention to the fact that actually one of the most vulnerable groups around the COVID stuff are people whose child protection plans have ended. And they're not at school and so on. And actually, then there's been a new incident in the house that's really been quite significant. So that's why we're going back now to look at those 512 children that are closed to us and not been open to us for the last 2 years. But I think it's a good model, as I do think we will, Councillor, we will be, whether it's 3, well, I think we'll get the timing right, 3 and 6 months. So for those where we're not, some of them become looked after, some are child in need, some are early help, but the ones that are close to us, that we actively go back and say, how are things? And hopefully if there's a problem or something building up, they can come and ask us earlier on, and we can do it child in need rather than child protection. Because 4.5 years, you can't keep a case open or a family open for that long on a child protection plan, you can't do that. But it'd be nice that it doesn't deteriorate, that you could pick it up earlier and help out earlier would be really a positive thing, I think. But next time I come, I'll let you know the outcome of the audit and the recommendations, but I'm sure it'll be in there.
Yeah, thank you. And then one last thing, Chair, sorry, is congratulations to the early help team on their award. I've not seen a press release, I've seen it on Twitter, so I've not seen a press release yet, but obviously because the social work awards are kind of postponed because of COVID, I'll see Marina Kitchen's tweet. Yeah. So they've won. So congratulations on that, and well done. And also the information, the thing you talked about there about things being picked up, especially when the child isn't at school or hasn't been seen. The way that information is shared now with other services, like healthcare and the police, has made a massive difference. And if they're seeing, if they go to hospital for something, we know straight away then who that child is and what for. So the way that information changed just over the last 2 or 3 years has made a really good impact.
Yeah, there's a system that runs in the NHS that when they can contact us and see if it's open to us. For example, there's a system with the police that if there's a domestic abuse referral, they can pass it out to schools and again, not just to us, which I think is a real positive. Interestingly, around the COVID situation, one of the concerns we did have when we did the 2 strategy discussions was at times the poor participation of our partners in strategy discussions and actually core groups and so on. Because those meetings are now done like this, like Teams, actually the participation has improved. And this definitely works really well for professionals. It probably works less well for some families who might end up having to use a phone and use WhatsApp and so on. So what we have got in our buildings, because in terms of my teams, our buildings remained open throughout this. On a fortnightly basis, 95% of children on child protection plans were seen face-to-face throughout this process. But in our large meeting rooms that are COVID secure, they do have Teams equipment in with a big screen and so on. So actually, if they want, parents can come into the room with the social worker and see the professionals on the screen in the room so that they can participate more fully in meetings. Because, definitely, it must be really challenging to try and take part in a meeting like this with a WhatsApp phone, apps. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from members? No, okay. Calvin, my question was going to be just answered about face-to-face and the impact of the pandemic on those interactions, but you think 90%?
No, we've been monitoring it throughout. In terms of child protection processes, we did risk assessments on every single case. So probably the few that we didn't was where we thought the child protection plan was about to end.
Yeah.
There were some families, particularly in the children with disabilities, where they've got physical disabilities, that really were quite anxious about having people come into what effectively was a shielded household.
Yeah.
But we visited households where and use PPE if we think there's a risk there. If people, and one or two families have said to us, we're shielding, you can't come in the building, and we've had to have the police and occasionally go to court actually to get in the building. We had one family at the very beginning that wouldn't let us in shortly afterwards because they were shielded and they were found in the community where there was a sort of child protection concern and ended up going to court and removing those children. But yeah, 95% plus every week we've seen them face to face. Lower levels for looked after children and child in need, but again, so our teams have been in throughout so that families can come to us. Actually, the service we provided has changed at the beginning, where some like food banks, like the one in Rugby for a while, because the social distancing weren't functioning, we were delivering food, which went down really well with families, I think. We were delivering medicine and so on as well, changed the nature of our relationship with them. So yeah, but face-to-face has been done.
Okay, right, thank you. If there are no further questions from members, then...
Can I just mention one thing? Because actually somebody did ask a question before this, and I thought I was going to get this question today. Did wonder whether what's happened is the numbers have come down because there's something called dual status. If we have a care order or an interim care order, they come off a child protection plan. So one way of bringing the numbers down actually is to go to court lots. And when the big drop in our child protection numbers happened, which was last year, actually we also had a 17% drop in the numbers of children we went to court on. So actually we've had fewer children going through the court process last year. It has risen during COVID, I have to say, and the numbers in court, because the court haven't been able to finish hearings because of just because they haven't got the technology until quite recently to do hybrid meetings. That's the biggest factor behind our rise in child protection looked after numbers, actually, because we've not been able to finish court processes. But the equipment's there now, and we do our hybrid court meetings. But actually, the dual status and going to court's not the reason why our child protection numbers have come down. It's about good practice, in my view.
Okay, good, thank you. Right, as there are no further questions, just thank you, Calvin, for introducing the report, for answering the questions. There are 2 recommendations for members. Are we happy? As written? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
Happy.
So some of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, members.
Okay, thank you, Calvin. Right then, back onto item 5 for the council plan, and I think Ian is now with us, but also perhaps Kim Garcia.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, we can hear you, thanks.
Okay, that's good. I come to you very quickly from a regular fixture, has been since the start of the pandemic. It's become a big part for the education community. Attendance on Tuesday lunchtimes for the head teachers' wellbeing and information sharing meeting jointly across education and public health is up to around 150 for many of the meetings. So it's become a big part of how they adapt and how they feel as a community, but they send their greetings too. 2 education reports today have been changed from major items to distribution, but subsequent to the meeting, more than happy to take any questions that there are in relation to the school deficits paper or indeed the education sufficiency paper. And then there are the shared papers across all of the scrutiny committees, and this is our version of it. What does one will follow in terms of OOP, And this one is the regular progress report in terms of the council plan. So in here you get a quick summary update report in terms of progress against all of the key business measures, and there is the opportunity to ask questions or make any observations in relation to any of the themes here that you want to see more information on or more action.
Okay, thanks, Ian. In relation to the two papers that were sent through yesterday, I haven't digested them fully, so I will come back to you with some questions after reading them. Okay. Open the floor then. Any questions from members? Corinne?
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the stats for NEET and things, and obviously some of the other bits and bobs as well. When do you anticipate that young people will actually be able to meet in person with someone again? To get the support that they need.
Yeah. In terms of children and young people who are vulnerable, those with the HCPs particularly, there have been contacts with them throughout the COVID period. They just haven't been in person. So we went from a position where it would have been telephone or technology-based contacts to many of them now being back in face-to-face provision in the school environment. Now, there are some who otherwise be labelled children missing education. We are trying to get those back into education as soon as possible. There are a number of dimensions to that work as well. It includes triaging those that have been identified by their families as elective home education to make sure it's a genuine election, as opposed to avoiding going back to school and getting into casework there. Which matches to one of the other cohorts here, where they haven't declared elective home education, but they haven't yet made it back into school. So there's casework with those families as well. Our contract in terms of transition 16 plus targeted work to minimise the risk of becoming EAT continues as well. Again, largely using technology rather than face-to-face meetings. And the focus there, of course, has been to make up the gap from reducing apprenticeships in the commercial sector. And it's possible to discern already that, as we might expect, there are more young people staying on to FE course provision and sixth form provision that there would be in other times.
Okay, but you don't anticipate them being able to meet face to face anytime soon?
Well, they're having face to face using technology or telephone contacts as the main means, and we're not expected to do face to face unless it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret?
Thank you, Chairman. This educational sufficiency annual update, I've got, like you, I've got a lot of concerns. I don't feel we can do it justice at this point in the meeting, to be honest. But there's some very worrying figures, particularly secondary in, well, one example is secondary in the Atherstone area, and it's looking really very concerning indeed. And it's not the only one, I'll just pick one example out. And, as I say, I've got a lot of concerns and lots of questions, but I just feel, A, I haven't really gone through the report in detail, and secondly, I don't think we've really got time to do it justice at this point.
Yeah.
I do think it's something important, though, Chairman, we need to come back to. It's really important.
Yeah, sufficiency is one of the key responsibilities that we do have. And of course, as a council target, we aim overall in the system for there to be around 4%, because that's kind of an optimum balance where parental preference can have some meaning. But you're absolutely right, there are some areas of the county which are far less than that 4% level when we look ahead over the next few years. So we do have to look at how working with the DFE and with Academies Trust, particularly in secondary, we can bring additional capacity online. It's more complex than it used to be when we were a direct provider.
Absolutely. Ian, can I just ask that 4%? Do you mean a 4% in my terminology, spare capacity? Is that what you aim for?
Yeah, below that, there is no real parental preference.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. Thank you. Well, I agree with the target. So we agree on that. It's just we're not meeting it in some cases.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I was going to raise exactly the same point. Big gaps in Leamington at primary and secondary to come, and I'd particularly like to hear, not now, but maybe in writing there's a few in the future. We're going to have a new all through school which should address some of these issues from 2023 onwards. But I'm particularly interested in kind of the bridging measures between now and then, because I'm not clear about how sufficiency is going to be addressed sort of in this interim period before we get the new all through school.
Yeah, definitely follow that up. It is something of an art as well as a science. Whilst we know the numbers are out there on census, it's Census Week this week in schools across the year groups, and we know what the pipeline is in anticipated future housing developments. Precisely when we bring new provision on stream is more of an art. And as well as the headline projects around new schools going through the free school process as part of their commissioning, there is how over an interim period you also commission additional class groups in the existing schools. And if you get it right, you do not have a situation where a school is bottom of the pile and short on both pupil numbers and therefore funding in a given year. But yeah, happy to take you through the pipeline of commissions in the Leamington area as part of that.
Thank you.
Dan.
Oh, hi, Chair. Thank you. I do need to head out now. I've got to take my daughter to an appointment, but I'd just like to request, because we've had so much information to go through over the last day or so, and because of the amount of work we've had and speak very earlier, could we request maybe we bring this back to the committee when we've got less of a workload, so we can really go through it? It's some really important information, and some of it is at a glance. I don't think we've had time, and a lot of us haven't either, to go over things and really think about the key points we want to talk about and maybe work on.
Yeah. One partly for the chair to pick up on, because I'm conscious there is a lot of work for you across children's services and education services. So as part of the thinking around the sufficiency paper being sent to you as information, and of course, any time if you've got questions around a locality, send them through to us and we'll directly work that through with you. And then the chair will be working with you in terms of the forward work programme. If there are particular themes that you want to pick up, not so much on a locality basis, but how we approach things across the system, I'm sure that will be a priority on the forward work programme time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm having connectivity problems, so I keep dropping in and out, I'm afraid. So apologies if it's interrupting things. Are there any more questions from members on the council plan? No? Okay. The recommendation is bland. I don't think there's any need to add anything to it personally. Speak up if you think we need to add something on. If not, we'll move on to item 6. Okay. On to the Ute then. I think it's back to you again, Ian.
Yeah, it's not different as an introduction on this one. On the OOP paper, happy to take any questions that there are across the themes there.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Does anyone want to start us off? Are we broadly happy with what's in there?
These will become regular reports each quarter.
Yes. I'm just double checking by looking at faces that no one hasn't got a hand up and I'm missing it because of the tech problems I've been having. No? Okay. Right then, the work programme, item 8. Helen did send an updated programme through yesterday, which I think she's trying to put on the screen.
Is it there yet?
No. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
As Ian alluded to, we do have quite a lot on the agenda, but conscious that the sufficiency, the education sufficiency papers probably does need to come back to be formal, but we need to address that. So for members, just email, otherwise we'll take it to chair and spokes as we always do. If it requires additional meetings, then we have to have additional meetings. Okay. Any comments at all about things perhaps that the members want to see on there that aren't on there? If not, I say email and we'll take a chair and spokes as well. Okay. Right then, the date of the next meeting is the 26th of October and it's on Teams, again, as is the norm. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. It's perhaps a bit longer than anticipated, but I think you'll agree with me that it was worth it for the first agenda item that we heard in particular. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Chair.
Bye. Thanks, Chair. Thanks all.
Yusuf could. Oh, you've gone. You're still there.
I'm here. I'm still
Yes.
here.
Could you just quickly let me know what the conclusion of that first item was, since I had to go? The one with the young people in.
Yeah, I will do.
There were fascinating insights from young people directly.
There were, yeah. What was the recommendation in the end?
Helen, I think someone she could perhaps read it to you.
Okay.
Also, Helen, I'm just conscious I didn't go back to updates from portfolio holders because I did look and neither Colin or Jeff were with us. So
No, we didn't have any, so that's fine.
Cabinet meeting down there.
Let me just find
meeting finished.
Notes. So,
my signal is terrible.
So we will be rewording the recommendation. I think Jill put something in the chat on this meeting, but it will be fairly similar and just include a cross-party and young people with relevant experience to give impetus to specific priorities raised by young